Although I tell you what.
Good evening and welcome to the March 3rd, 2026 City Council regular hybrid meeting. I am Mayor Dave Rosenbaum. Tonight's hybrid City Council meeting is being brought to you in person by Zoom. We are also broadcasting on the city's YouTube channel and on MITV channel 21. Thank you to all and thank you for joining us today. Council members, please have your microphones on for the roll call. Deputy City Clerk Deb Estrada, please call a roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Anderl. Here. Councilmember Shea. Here. Councilmember Reynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Weicker. Here. Councilmember Weinberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
Here.
And Mayor Rosenbaum.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a quorum present. Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, if you join us, please stand and face the flag.
We have to read this whole thing. Okay, if you have joined in the council chambers, please stand and face the flag. Okay, to join via Zoom, we don't have that. Okay, please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here you go. Thank you.
Okay, we now move to the approval of today's agenda. If there are no questions, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
There's a motion by Councilmember Weinberg and second by Councilmember Reynolds. Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor Becker.
Aye.
Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilmember Shea.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderl.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker. Aye. And Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes and the agenda is approved. Next up on the agenda, we have a study session on AB 6893, compliance with growth management hearings board order, and a follow-up discussion on our financing on affordable housing. For that, we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Can you call on Jeff?
We will call on CPD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, City Council. There's my video. I'd like to introduce Deputy Director Allison Van Gorp and Elliot Weiss from Community Attributes, a consultant that's been working on us for this effort. This is a follow-up from February 17th when we had a lengthy presentation regarding GMA compliance and some of the work that's went in so far in the background related to technical analysis and so forth. In reflecting on that session on February 17th, we felt that it would be helpful for the council and for the public if we came back and expanded a little bit more on the concept of leveraging and how that relates to affordable housing. So Allison and Elliot have a short presentation that they're going to walk you through, and we'll have ample time for your questions at the end. With that, Allison, take it away. Share your screen.
All right, thank you. I'm going to walk through the first half of this presentation, and then we'll pass it off to Elliot. And yeah, like Jeff said, we're just hoping to go over a little more detail on a few of the topics we touched on last time. I'm going to start with just kind of a quick summary of where we've come and where we're at now. So just as a reminder, the Growth Management Hearings Board appeal that we're under now, the comp plan was adopted in November of 2024, and it was appealed by the nonprofit organization FutureWise in 2025. And that went to the Growth Management Hearings Board for the appeal hearing. They issued a decision last August, and that requires some action from the city by July 31st of this year. The Growth Board order has 4 issues that the city is required to act on: land capacity, adequate provisions, a station area, sub-area plan, and anti-displacement policies. We've talked over these topics a number of times already. I'm not going to go into much more detail about them now, but just wanted to give that overview of the 4 issues that we'll be touching on. At the last meeting on February 17th, the council gave us the direction to take a 2-phased approach to compliance with the Growth Board order. And the first phase is focused in the dark purple area that includes the existing town center and the multifamily zones that are directly adjacent to it on the east and west. And we'll be looking to focus our near-term action in that area with some potential up zones and other changes to development regulations. And then phase 2 will be in the other areas in light purple, and we're not intending to make any amendments to the zoning in those areas until it's required under state law in 2029. Last meeting, February 17th, the council also reviewed this preliminary modified station area. As you may recall, the city is required to adopt a sub-area plan for the station area, and the station area is defined as the half-mile walking distance from the light rail station entrances. And the city has worked to modify that boundary slightly to kind of sync it up with existing land ownership, streets, and zoning boundaries. And that was all reviewed at the last meeting. This boundary is now out for public feedback through the end of next week. Okay, now diving into our topic for tonight, we wanted to talk a little bit more about strategies for financing affordable housing. And kind of at the most basic level, there's a few ingredients for success for affordable housing projects. You need an experienced developer, available land, local financial resources, as well as public and private funding or financing. These types of affordable housing projects tend to be quite complex and have multiple financing sources and often multiple partners helping to bring things together. Cities sometimes can bring to the table either available land, such as surplus public property, or financial resources that they either have access to through taxing revenue or resources that have been saved over time from their general fund. Many cities here in East King County also partner with ARCH, that stands for a Regional Coalition for Housing. And that organization works closely together with the member cities and can help bring all of these ingredients together. They have existing relationships with many nonprofit developers throughout the region that construct and operate affordable housing. They also have a very good understanding of the various funding sources and grants and tax credits that can be available to help fund these projects. And they provide technical assistance to cities and developers as they work to put together a portfolio of funding and financing for a project. Finally, I wanted to touch on a couple of terms that we've talked about a couple of times before. These are two policies that will make up part of the adequate provisions, one of the requirements from the Growth Board order. We need to adopt policies that help us achieve the affordable housing targets that have been set out for us in state law. And so these are the primary two strategies from the adequate provisions that we're looking to employ. The first is inclusionary zoning, and that is a requirement for a percentage of units in a development project to meet an affordability level or requirement. So a certain percentage of the units in a project would be set aside as affordable. And then the second concept is fee in lieu, and that's an allowance that when you have an inclusionary zoning policy and you're requiring a certain percentage of units to be affordable, the developer could choose either to provide those units within the building, or instead they could pay a fee. And that fee would go to the city into an affordable housing fund. The city could hold that money and pool it together and then later use it to fund or construct affordable housing units in other projects. So that's one way that the city can generate local financial resources for affordable housing. All right, now I'm going to pass it off to Elliot Weiss from CAI, and he's going to talk a little bit more about how these tools can be used together to help generate funding for affordable housing projects.
Yeah,
Right,
thank you. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Council, for having me, and good evening. I was here for that February 17th meeting virtually when my colleague from CAI, Michaela Jellicoe, presented, and I will revisit some of the numbers that she presented at that meeting. But it occurred to us after the meeting that, it might be useful to clarify some of the more technical aspects of how fee in lieu dollars translate into the production of affordable housing. And so that's the purpose of this discussion tonight. I've outlined the steps here on this slide generally as far as the mechanics of what we're calling direct delivery of affordable housing units are concerned. The city receives the dollars that are paid by the developers, the fee in lieu money, to a housing fund and identifies an affordable housing developer as a partner. The city funds that housing developer's project with dollars from the housing fund, dedicates those dollars to that project. And then the developer, who's got expertise in how development projects are financed, supplements those funds through the fee in lieu program with dollars from other sources, grants, loans, tax credits, those sorts of incentives that are available for affordable housing construction at other governmental levels, federal tax credits, for instance. And through this process, a smaller contribution of dollars can be leveraged to cover a higher total development cost. And we relate this to the concept of having a mortgage on a home. You take a certain amount of money, that's your down payment, you finance the rest. The same is true, generally speaking, in commercial real estate, where this fee in lieu that the city receives could be used to either satisfy or supplement a potential quote unquote down payment in this analogy. Now, this does not necessarily absolve the city of other contributions or other adequate provisions, to use the language that we have been using. Things like the dedication of developable land, surplusing public property for affordable housing development would still be beneficial to affordable housing creation because it does change the economics of the development project for the affordable housing developer. If the city's able to contribute land to the deal, then the developer doesn't have to pay money to acquire the land. And so it reduces the total development cost. But in a nutshell, this is the concept of leverage, where we take a certain number of dollars generated through the fee in lieu program, and we magnify the impact of that by partnering with an affordable housing developer who understands how to leverage those dollars. This slide sort of summarizes that process in a simple flow chart. The developer pays the fee in lieu as stipulated by the city's development code. That fee in lieu money is put into an affordable housing fund. Those dollars from the housing fund are dedicated to your partner, the affordable housing developer. And that developer then leverages those funds to cover the total project cost. And once the project is built, the project yields affordable units. And so that's how we sort of determine how much affordable housing unit capacity we could plan on for the city of Mercer Island based on the number of dollars that could be generated through a fee in lieu under an inclusionary zoning program. And so these next several slides are slides that you saw on February 17th, when, again, my colleague Michaela Jellicoe presented them. But just to sort of summarize where we're at, we followed directions from the Department of Commerce to summarize housing unit capacity by affordability level at each of the income bands for which you've received a housing unit allocation. That analysis resulted in a deficit of 519 units between 0 and 50% of area median income, with the vast majority of those units existing between 0 and 30% of area median income. That 519 number is before any modifications to existing zoning. Under the assumptions that we have to work with, many of which were sourced from the direct experience of Arch, which Allison referenced earlier, we can estimate the number of housing units that could be produced with inclusionary zoning, both without and then with an upzone to certain zoning designations in and around town center. We start with the cost to develop affordable housing, which Arch has estimated at between $425 and $500 per square foot. That includes land acquisition costs, so that number goes down if the city is also able to dedicate land for affordable housing construction. We have to figure out how much square feet actually need to be built. And so for that, an average unit size assumption is useful. And those average unit sizes generally range between 500 and 1,400 net square feet, net being the rentable building area. There are common areas like a gym or something like that, just corridors in between the units that mean there's actually a few more square feet per unit than just the 500 to 1,400, which the developer still has to pay for. But notable is that affordable units trend larger than market rate units. They tend to be more of the 2 and 3 bedroom variety than the studio or efficiency variety. So we make an assumption there, an informed assumption about the size of the units. Average development costs resulting from these prices and our assumptions around unit size range from about $510,000 to $600,000 per unit. The note here is that we're assuming 1,200 gross square feet per unit respectively. That'd be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 net square feet, just to compare it to the previous bullet. Housing unit deficit, 519 units from the prior slide. That would equate to a cost to develop affordable housing to serve this identified need of 519 units of about $265 million to about $311 million. Assuming these funds are leveraged, to go back to the concept of leverage that I introduced on the other slide, the funding required to serve that need would be estimated at $66 million to $109 million, assuming a loan to cost ratio of 65 to 75%. And simply speaking, there are some technical details, but a loan to cost ratio is just essentially the inverse of what you might think of as a down payment. It's the project cost that is remaining to be covered after the developer contributes equity to the development project. Now, loan to cost can vary widely from roughly 55% to 90%. And there are a number of factors in that variance, including project type, location, risk. There are funding programs through the federal government that allow affordable housing projects to be funded at a relatively high loan to cost, say 80 to 90%. And so our assumption of 65 to 75% might be a conservative assumption, but it's one we feel is useful for planning purposes. Another slide from the presentation that Michaela gave 2 weeks ago. This shows the resulting capacity deficit based on the proposed upzone of town center to 8 stories and surrounding multifamily zones to 6 stories. That does eliminate the deficit at that 30 to 50% AMI income band, which is useful because the types of programs and policies that we might suggest to target the 30 to 50% income band are different than those that we might suggest to target the 0 to 30% income band. So this upzone that is being proposed would really allow us to target our efforts to just that 0 to 30% income band. However, in terms of the number of units we are trying to solve for, from 519 to 510, it's not a huge change in the aggregate, but that 510 would be the resulting number that we are planning for after this proposed upzone to the town center and multifamily zones. And so with the upzone, total town center and multifamily capacity gets estimated at just shy of 1,700 units. Additional capacity from the upzone eliminates the needs for other adequate measures or adequate provisions to serve those affordability levels greater than 30% of AMI. That's the point I was just making about getting rid of that deficit at 30 to 50. We talk about internally subsidized housing capacity. That's based on programs and policies specific to Mercer Island. A 10% inclusionary program with affordability levels consistent with the current incentive zoning program in town center results in 171 units produced through that program. If we assume that everyone who develops a multifamily building in the area affected by the upzone decides to perform, as we call it, which means they actually include the affordable units in the development project. If, sort of in the inverse scenario, those developers choose to pay in lieu using an assumption of $25 per gross square foot of in lieu fee rate, that would result in $30.7 million, hypothetically, of in lieu fees that the city would receive as a result of these development projects. That in lieu fee could support the direct delivery through some of the mechanisms that I've already discussed of between 170 and 200 units of affordable housing. And so to go back to the flow chart that I presented earlier and put some numbers to it that you've seen in our analysis previously, the developer pays the fee in lieu. That results in $30.7 million, again, hypothetically, and depending on the fee in lieu rate that you as a council would adopt. That money goes into the housing fund, the affordable housing fund. It gets dedicated to the developer, the affordable housing developer or city partner, as I previously described. That developer leveraged those funds, and based on leverage and assuming 65 to 75% loan to cost, that could yield $88 to $103 million of total project cost. We divide that by the range of costs that Arch has given us for the production of affordable housing units, $425 to $500 per square foot, and that then yields 170 to 200 units. So this is just a more granular breakdown of some of the assumptions behind the analysis that was presented 2 weeks ago. We wanted to make sure that there was a solid understanding of the mechanics of all of this so that if we choose to proceed with some inclusionary zoning provisions and a fee in lieu of providing those units through an inclusionary zoning program, that there was a common understanding of how those units actually came to fruition within the city limits of Mercer Island. So finally, the baseline versus scenario comparison that Michaela presented 2 weeks ago. Under baseline, no rezone or upzone of town center and multifamily zones. There's 519 unit deficit that we're trying to solve for. Under scenario 1, which includes the upzone of town center zones to 8 stories and the rezone or upzone of multifamily to 6 stories adjacent to town center, that cuts the deficit to 510 units. The direct delivery total cost under that scenario is about $275 million, but the in lieu fees of just short of 31 million allow you to leverage that funding up to potentially $102 million and fund somewhere around 190 units. I think the range I gave on a previous slide was 170 to 200, and that results in remaining unit deficit that needs other adequate provisions, with those other adequate provisions given in bullet points on the right. Surplusing public land for affordable housing development, more robust partnerships with affordable housing providers, and other sources of financing, tax credits, low interest loans, state and other grants. This list could go on because there are other tools available to the city, but this is simply meant to indicate how those fee in lieu dollars solve for a certain portion of the units that we are currently showing as a deficit in terms of affordable housing unit capacity. I think, Allison, I'm happy to take questions here if it's useful.
Councilman Reynolds.
First of many. I think last meeting we talked about this. I asked if the $500 a square foot figure you had, if that was the number, I can't recall now, if that allowed for the fact that Mercer Island land is more expensive. I just want to confirm it sounds like it does not. And do we have an updated estimate of what that figure would be if we allowed for the higher cost of land here?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Reynolds. As I said, I was at that meeting. I noted your question. We've not been able to complete additional analysis yet, but it is absolutely on our to-do list. That estimate of 425 to 500, because it comes from Arch, is representative of transactions in Arch cities, which have similar economics to Mercer Island, but may not be a perfect comp. So we're talking Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, Sammamish. Mercer Island is the largest of the Arch cities. We will follow up with revised numbers once we've been able to conduct an analysis of land sale prices in Mercer Island specifically.
Another one? Go for it. I want to make sure that I'm not want to make sure there's no double count that I'm misunderstanding. Can you bring up the slide that you had near the beginning where it had the unit count at each affordability level?
This one? Is that the one you're looking for or something else?
We're not
Can't
seeing
see your
anything yet.
screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sharing.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so the inclusionary zoning is taking care of everything above the 30% threshold, or at least that's what I'm understanding. If we adopt fee in lieu to raise money for the 0 to 30% portion of the cost, have we then just shifted the problem because instead of building the 30 to 80% things, we're getting money to build the 0 to 30, and we no longer have 30 to 80% housing?
It's a good question, but fortunately, I think the answer is no. We're not eliminating deficits above 30% of AMI by virtue of anything related to the inclusionary zoning program. We're eliminating those deficits just by increasing total zoned capacity. Our analysis has shown that based on a distribution of market rents that we see within market rate projects that have been developed in recent years, the market does actually produce some units at these lower affordability levels. It's not a huge percentage of the total, but there are some. And so using market data, we can justify an assumption that, there will be some units, maybe they're smaller units, they might be studios, that will be delivered at somewhere between 30 and 50% of AMI. And so it's the up zone under this scenario one that we've been discussing that eliminates that 6-unit deficit. The fee in lieu requirement need not be for 0 to 30% AMI units specifically. They could be for units at any affordability level. If the fee is structured in such a way that the developers opt to pay the fee instead of provide the units directly, then that fee is what the city, through an affordable housing developer partner, can leverage to solve for the remaining 510 or 500. Yeah, I think it's 510 units.
So I think our current code provides for 15% affordable units, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Are we saying that we're going to require the 15% and levy a fee in lieu on more property? Or is it we could reduce the 15 down to 7 for some property and make them pay a little fee in lieu on the difference?
I would defer to staff in terms of the proposal that's being advanced, but my understanding is the new inclusionary zoning requirement would replace, not supplement, the existing requirement.
So, Allison, would that mean we would have would we still have the 15% requirement in the current plan?
I think what we're talking about, or what was modeled by community attributes in the data that's on the screen, was modifying the existing requirement to reduce it from 15% of the units to 10% of the units at 50% AMI.
Okay, and if somebody built at 10% and agreed to do that, they would not pay the fee in lieu? It's only if they want.
Well, they have an option. They can decide to either build the units or pay the fee. And depending on how we structure the fee, the amount of the fee that we choose, that could incentivize them to go one way or the other. Like if the fee is quite high, they might prefer to just build the units. If the fee is relatively low, they might prefer to not build the units and pay the fee, because that would make their project pencil out a little easier.
Okay, thanks. I have some more, but I see other people have raised hands, so maybe you can circle back.
City Manager Bob.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your good questions, Councilmember Reynolds. I just want to make sure for folks that might be watching at home or watch this recording in the future, we haven't done any of that yet, right? The fee in lieu is still in development. Additional inclusionary zoning is still being, worked. So I just want to qualify as these questions are coming up. I think it's good because they illustrate the work that we're doing, but they are still hypothetical and speculative. So if we could just remind folks that is the nature of the discussion tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Weinberg.
Yeah, and along the same lines, I presume that if we were to implement a fee and lieu program, and if it were to generate the $30 million of fee that is projected, and if we were then to turn that into 190 units of housing that's available in the 0 to 30% range, that the numbers in the second to rightmost column that are in black ink on this slide would go down by 190. I'm not sure if it would all be in the top category or spread across that category, but that 190 units has to be built somewhere, and that there would reduce the amount of other units in other categories. I presume that there's room for 190 units in there. There's looking at over 1,000 units of black ink there. Or was the 190 units already factored into those numbers?
No.
That's a great question. I suppose, in short, the 190 units that could be produced have not been netted out of the other categories. But they might not need to be. It would depend on where the land came from for the construction of those affordable units. Right now, any land that is owned by the city of Mercer Island is not being considered as far as generating capacity in those other income bands. So if the city were a land partner in the affordable housing development deal, hypothetically, then it wouldn't reduce any of the capacity that we're showing in those other income bands because the lands used for that analysis would still be available for private development. Sort of a devil's in the details sort of situation. And to the city manager's point, we are speaking in hypotheticals here. But if you assumed that those 190 units were being built on land that could otherwise be available for private development, and that we in the analysis assumed would be used for private development, then yes, we would need to net out those units that are being shown as surplus capacity in other income bands.
Okay, thank you. Director Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Elliot, just a question for you. This wasn't why I raised my hand, but it's the fee in lieu of the upzone will actually build the city's capacity to actually build the fee in lieu of. It's a direct relationship. I think when Elliot talked about this slide a number of minutes ago, the zoning will take the existing zoning will take care of what Elliot and Allison have pointed out is a substantial part of our above 30% AMI affordable housing needs. But the upzone will also then enable the fee in lieu of to generate. So the hypothetical scenarios that Elliot ran through, I think he ran through an or, it was this or this. The idea is that we're starting, or at least as I see it, we're starting at a baseline. And that as we move forward in time, there's going to be a need to review housing unit production at what AMI bands, how much fee in lieu of has been generated. And it is very likely that there's going to need to be future conversations with the city and the city council about whether adjustments need to be made as we move into time and production starts and we start seeing results on the ground. I do believe we had a similar discussion during the 2024 comprehensive plan update, a very similar discussion as we're having here tonight related to that, where this is a Kodak moment, what we're looking at here, and we're at the beginning. but there is going to be reviews necessary over time as the numbers change. And I would suspect one of those first reviews will likely be 2029, which is also a required check-in, a midpoint check-in during the 10-year period between comprehensive plan updates.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
We talked a little bit about leverage, and it strikes me that there are two types of leverage. One is when other people throw in money as a funding source, like Kirkland, Bellevue, et cetera. Maybe they contribute through the Arch Housing Trust Fund money towards this. Another type might be tax credits or other incentives. But it seems like the only thing you're allowing for in your analysis is the loan to value thing, that you could borrow part of the money. Is that correct? And how does the math change if you consider the other possible sources?
The assumption as far as financing is concerned doesn't change. What I refer to as loan to cost remains the same. And I wanted to highlight that there's tremendous variability in loan to cost. We're making what we think is a reasonably conservative assumption and varying it to provide some sensitivity analysis between 65 and 75%. But as I noted on that slide, the observed range is more like 55 to 90%. And so there's significant variability. The other sources, like from the Arch Housing Trust Fund, or other funds that the city could raise locally, would just supplement those fee and lieu dollars. So it would allow you to cover a larger total project cost. But it just kind of goes into that pot of the, again, to use the analogy from home ownership, down payment, right? It becomes supplemental to the dollars that the fee and lieu program would generate.
So if we generated $20 million in fee and lieu, and well, actually, what was the number? Did you have 30 million was the fee and lieu?
It was about 31 million, 30.7 million. So if you generated 20 million in fee and lieu and found $10.7 million elsewhere, then the outputs of the analysis would be the same. You could make up any gap from the fee and lieu program with other funding sources.
But similarly, if we have 30.7 of our own through fee and lieu and got 30 million by some miracle from some other cities in the region, we could build twice as many units.
You could fund a lot more affordable housing units, yes, subject to, all of the other caveats related to the assumptions baked into the analysis.
And then the related question is the loan to cost ratio makes some sense to me if we're building housing at the 80 to 100% level or something like that. But presumably at the 0 to 30% ratio or level, we're not collecting very much rent, or the developers are not collecting very much rent. Can they really borrow at the 75% level when they're collecting minimal amounts of rent?
It's project specific is the short answer, and I don't want to give you a cop-out response here. Nor am I in the lending industry, so I don't claim deep expertise here. But generally speaking, it puts you into different loan products for commercial real estate construction. Those projects are subsidized by the federal government or offered directly by the federal government, and that allows them some more flexibility in funding terms.
It seems like something that would pencil out at an 80% level on the associated rent. I mean, 80% of your area median income, if it penciled out to be able to cover the loan, something affordable at 30% is not likely going to be able to cover that same loan, right? And I worry that we're overestimating our loan to cost ratio pretty dramatically by not allowing for that. So I wonder if you could think about that.
Yeah, happy to. And again, we've got those values calculated. It's all in the spreadsheets, not in the presentation, but we've got those values calculated for that full 55 to 90% range. So we'd be happy to return with those just to show you the sensitivity of that assumption, if that's something that you would like.
Thank you.
Okay, keep going.
All right. I think I just had one final slide at the very end talking about next steps. So like we talked about on February 17th, we are planning a community information session here coming up next week on March 10th. That's Tuesday. And that'll be a webinar for the public to join and learn more about the Growth Management Hearing Board decision and the city's compliance strategy. We also have a public feedback period open through next Friday on that station area boundary. And then we're going to be continuing to keep the council updated and getting your input and direction throughout the spring on this project, and continuing legislative review at the Planning Commission later in the spring, and then back to the City Council in early summer to meet our July 31st deadline for finalizing the amendments.
Councilor Reynolds.
How many people are signed up so far? Do we know?
I don't know that.
Okay. And you're not intending, I think at that point, to cover the TOD stuff. This is only about the GMHB compliance, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Allison, you said this is your last slide?
It is.
Okay. Is that an old hand, Councilmember Reynolds?
Yes, I'm working on shutting it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda, we have the city manager's report, and we welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Casey's going to assist with the screen share. Let me close my pop-ups here. Okay, next slide, Casey. And one more. Council, here is your meeting snapshot for the next couple of weeks. As a reminder, your next council meeting is Tuesday, March 17th. As for the boards and commissions, the Parks and Recreation Commission will be meeting this week. Next week, the Utility Board meets at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, and then we will hold an information session on the Growth Management Hearing Board order at 6 o'clock p.m. on the same night. As a reminder, we keep all of our meetings updated and posted to our website at the link that's on the bottom of your screen. Next slide. Got a handful of updates and a good segue. Speaking of board and commission recruitment, I wanted to remind you that we have 3 vacancies currently on our boards. One is on the Arts Council, one is on the Open Space Conservancy Trust, and one on the Utility Board. I think we may have applications for each one of those seats, but applications have been a little light. So I just wanted to remind you that recruitment is open for just a few more days through March 6th. And then council, we will be coming to you to make those appointments at your meeting on March 17th. This is also a good reminder that we're looking down the stretch. Probably in just a couple of weeks, we'll be opening the recruitment for our annual board and commission recruitment process. So stand by for more information on that. Next slide. A communications reminder, and our communications manager is sitting right next to me. He has been supporting us, promoting the need to gather feedback on the transportation improvement program. So this is a reminder to you as well, council, that the public comment period on the TIP is now open. As a reminder, your transportation improvement plan comes to you annually. It covers roadway, pedestrian, and bicycle projects planned for the 6-year period from 2027 to 2032. We have a Let's Talk page stood up on this, and we're continuing to push out communications over the city's communications channel. Council, your first touch on this will be April 7th, where we'll have a formal public comment period at that meeting. And then the TIP is scheduled to be adopted at the first meeting in May. Next slide, please. All right, I wanted to take a moment to recap a couple of days of challenging situation we had last week. It's kind of an honor tonight that we have a number of our maintenance team members in the council room and watching in a room adjacent, because it was really credit to them and our engineering team that we were able to resolve in less than 48 hours a blockage that was detected in the sewer lake line. This started last Monday when our system sent off alarms saying that pump station 10 on the north end of the island had a problem. This is in Reach 5. Reach is just a fancy term for a different section of the lake line. When we got out there, we confirmed that there was a likely blockage in the lake line. And as a reminder, that's the main pipe that conveys sewage off the island. Unfortunately, the backup resulted in some discharge of sewage into the lake. Your staff team notified King County Public Health, the Department of Ecology, and residents that were impacted along the shoreline. Next slide, please. Although I've included some notes here, I just have to tell you that this was, 36 hours of incredible intensity with a broad staff team working to solve this issue. We began troubleshooting right away, and council, as you're aware, getting into the lake line has always been the challenge for us. Using a sewer jet truck, ultimately, staff worked to clear the blockage and to clean the affected section of pipe. The part I'm skipping over here is that it took some real ingenuity to figure out how to get into that pipe. We're thankful that we have tenured employees here that came together to solve for that. And by Tuesday evening, the lake line was operational again. I want to also give a shout out to the neighbors and community members that were impacted by this sewer lake line problem. We sent out an alert first thing Tuesday morning and said, we have a problem. Stop discharging wastewater. And the response was immediate. If that had not happened, we would have had an even bigger problem. So my thanks to the community for their partnership. And certainly, as I've already mentioned, huge shout out to the Public Works team, our engineers, our maintenance workers who were working around the clock, the emergency management team, communications, and others. It was a great response. Next slide, please. Ultimately, council, I spoke to many of you over that 36-hour period. Where my blood pressure was as this was happening. This is a very serious utility emergency, and it continues to highlight the vulnerability that we have of the lake line, especially because access to that line is limited. So I wanted to share tonight that we never waste a good emergency. This adds to the work that we've already been doing on the lake line. So we're meeting this week and next to debrief the event, review our actions, and see if there's any opportunities for improvement. Certainly, I welcome any input you would like to share with me. We are going to put a camera inside the lake line between pump stations 10 and 11. That's where the blockage was detected to document our conditions and connections to identify anything else that needs to be addressed right now. We are also working on developing a design and permitting contingency. Should this happen again, and unfortunately it will, we need to be able to respond faster if access to the pipe is needed. I shared with some of you that thankfully we were able to get into the pipe. If we had not been able to go through an existing access, we would have been seeking an emergency permits for many permitting agencies to put in that access pipe. That would have slowed us down by not just days, but possibly weeks, and in an extreme situation, months. That's just not acceptable. And so we need to come up with a plan so that we can respond to these emergencies in this aging infrastructure. And finally, we have a lot of data and information from other lakeline projects that will certainly inform our next steps. Council, between the water system and the sewer system, we have a lot of projects on our plate. I certainly continue to recommend making those investments and focusing on this infrastructure. It is essential, and when something like this happens, it's a really serious emergency. Finally, a thank you to the council for the support you offered during these couple of days. I know many of you were talking to community members and doing other things while the staff was focusing on the immediate response. Okay, switching gears, couple of events to highlight, and then that will conclude my presentation. This Saturday, just wanted to make sure these two items are on your calendar. The Senior Resource Fair is happening here at the Community Center. Gosh, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. It's a really popular opportunity for our senior adults in our community to stop by, meet with vendors, others that are providing resources on and off the island. And there's even some seminars planned from 12:30 to 1:30. So the main event is from 10 to 12 here at the Community Center, and then some additional seminars and featured presentations from 12:30 to 1:30. And once you're done here, we encourage you to pop over to the North End Starbucks, where members of our police department will be holding a coffee with a cop. It's just a great opportunity for community members and others to meet with the police department, ask questions, and learn a little bit more about what they're doing in the community. Next slide, please. Family movie night returns. My kids would probably enjoy this. Friday, March 13th. This is a fun event that we started, I think, a year ago. We'll be hosting at 5:30 here at the community center. Looks like the movie feature is Super Mario Brothers. All right, we provide snacks and pajamas, pillows, and blankets are encouraged. All of our recreation events are posted on our website, and we have more information if anyone would like to attend.
Great, thank you.
Oh, one more. Oops, sorry, I forgot about this. And council, I know you have this on your calendars. I want to make sure this is on everyone else's calendars. March 28th is the opening of the 2 line. We've seen the Sound Transit trains in testing mode for several weeks now, but we're excited to announce that the line is opening March 28th. The event that's happening here on Mercer Island is from 10 to 2 at the Park and Ride. Council, there is a ribbon cutting that will be at 9 o'clock over in Seattle, and we'll have more information for all of you on the logistics. But in the meantime, we wanted to make sure our community has this on our calendar. And as we get closer to the date, we'll be rolling out more information about parking and transportation to actually get here because the town center will be really busy that day. All right, I think that might be my last slide. Oh, one more or two. Yes, this is the last slide. Wanted to say just a heartfelt thank you again to the Youth and Family Services Foundation for hosting the fundraising breakfast at the beginning of February. We had nearly 500 attendees, and it was just an outstanding success. I'm told that fundraising is approaching a $450,000 goal, which goes right back into the Youth and Family Services Department. And since council, I shared with you today what is a pretty challenging fiscal situation for the city. This partnership just means that much more to us. So thank you to the Youth and Family Services Foundation, all of the staff, and a huge moment of gratitude to the recreation team who work late the night before and are up early in the morning supporting the event. Overall, it was a great success. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next item of business is appearances. It's the opportunity for anyone to speak to the city council on any item, except items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. Deputy City Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the council?
Thank you, Mayor. We do have 3 individuals, actually 4 individuals that have signed up.
I believe.
I believe one is not in the waiting room, so that leaves us with 3.
Okay, tonight's agenda will include in-person public appearances and remote public appearances via Zoom. Individuals wishing to address the council may do so in person or by Zoom or telephone, provided they have registered with the city clerk's office by 4 p.m. today. When it's your turn to speak, you'll be called on by name. Remarks must be addressed to the council as a whole and not to individual council or staff members. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the city council may be requested to leave the meeting. Please speak audibly and state your name and city of residence for the record. There will be a timer on the screen. You have 3 minutes to speak. When your time is ended, your microphone and video will be turned off. I will thank you for your comments and move to the next speaker or item of business. Staff, please promote or welcome the first speaker.
Mayor, our first speaker is Fan Yuan, and he intended or she intended to be here in person. Is that person here?
I'm not seeing her.
Doesn't look like they're in the waiting room either. So our next person is Chuck Spees. Is he in the room? Yep. Thank you.
From the podium.
Please.
Good evening, council members. My name is Chuck Spees. I'm the staff representative for ASME Council 2, Local 21M. You see them in green. It's your local city employees. We've come here today in solidarity after our members have overwhelmingly rejected the city's last best final contract proposal last week. We've been bargaining in good faith since August of last year in an attempt to reach an agreement that respects and values the work our members provide, and yet we don't have an agreement. We appreciate the city's desire to be conservative with public funds. We urge you to consider the other costs, the cost to morale, to retention of those tenured employees that were just mentioned, cost of ongoing mediation, which I had to file for yesterday, cost to the relationships that the city has with its labor force. Our members serve this community, but they don't live in this community. We saw some housing affordability things come up that reaches all of our members also, but they still come here every day. Your employees cannot afford to live here or even close by for the most part. And our goal is not to negotiate a contract that provides a living wage for Mercer Island, but to help mitigate some of the additional impacts of those commutes, of the disruptive emergency callouts that they respond to, commutes that take hours out of their personal lives to provide these city services that employees in other cities don't have to face. We need a contract that helps retain the talented and dedicated employees you have and the ability to recruit the best candidates possible when the need arises. The stated goal of the city's bargaining team when we met was to maintain a cost-neutral contract or as close to cost-neutral as possible. A 3-year cost-neutral contract feels like falling behind for our members. We need something that moves them forward. I've heard the city council commend and applaud our members for their work in previous meetings. We need to find a way to show them that they are valued and reward their ongoing commitment and contributions to this community. We are amenable to a variety of ways to do this, everything from longevity pay, retirement support, standby pay increases, even changes in the definition of a holiday for people working the flex schedules to help accommodate those commutes. There has to be some way that some of these changes can be made and we can find a solution. Nobody wants a labor dispute. We want certainty. We want to reach an agreement that moves us forward. We want to keep serving this community. I believe that's what you want too. We look around at all these green shirts, more than could fit in this room, over 30 people, more on Zoom. They're logged in remotely. They're your employees. They're the people who do the work this community needs. They are here instead of trying to get home to their families because this is important to them. They need a contract. We are hoping that you can empower your bargaining team to find a solution that'll reach an agreement that we can all ratify and also values and respects the work that these members provide to this wonderful community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, our next speaker is Scott Heath.
Hello, my name is Scott Heath. I have worked for the city for over 10 years. I'm currently a foreman in the Public Works Department, and I am the local 21M president, and I have been for 6 years. This is my 4th contract negotiation with the city, and it is the first time that we have been at an impasse. It is also the first time that the chief negotiator for the city has threatened negotiations. A week before they started, so I'm going to read to you an email that our staff rep, Chuck Spies, sent the Human Resources Department documenting an interaction between myself and the Public Works Director. The email is dated August 20th, 2025. Hello, Human Resources. I have some concerning behavior from Jason Kittner that I would like to document but keep confidential at this point at the request of our members. I recently filed a grievance on Thursday, August 14th. It was filed to address concerns of skimming that were brought to me by our members. I was later informed that upon learning of the grievance, Mr. Kittner called the union president, Scott Heath, and proceeded to berate him at length for us filing a grievance. Among the many things said by Mr. Kittner were, quote, "We're fucking greedy, and this was bullshit."
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. We have policies around what we're allowed to say during appearances and around specific people, and I'm just wondering if reading the specific language here and the specific allegations about particular people is allowed.
City Manager Bond.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the point of order. It would be, it's disappointing to me that a personnel matter is being read aloud in council chambers. As your city manager, I hold in high regard my duty to honor the request that was just read aloud for confidentiality. We've been treating these complaints as such. Given that, besides the inappropriate language, I do not see a reason that the comments may not continue. It will be at your pleasure, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Your point of order is not sustained. Please continue.
that this was really poor timing with negotiations coming, and we'll have to see how they go now. Negotiations are going to be a dandy. I hope you have a dollar amount, and I hope it's big. And you should have given me a heads up. These actions by the director were not only unprofessional, but they were also illegal. He implied retaliation that could jeopardize our upcoming bargaining agreement and interfered with union business. I'm sure his behavior violated a number of city personnel policies, but the legal implications of this retaliation are something the union is willing to pursue if needed. Our right to grieve violations of the contract and to engage in good faith bargaining are guaranteed by law, and we must know that they are protected. It is only at the request of our members and their concerns of future retaliation, as well as a desire to preserve a professional relationship, that I'm not asking to do more than document this right now. If at any point in our negotiations it becomes apparent that our director is going to act in bad faith and detract from our bargaining sessions, I will not hesitate to involve our attorney and pursue matters further. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy City Clerk, is there anybody else who's signed to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There are no further appearances. We'll now move to our next item of business, which is approval of the consent agenda. Staff, please put the consent agenda on the screen. Okay, the consent agenda contains 12 items which are available on the screen and in the agenda packet for your review. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Anderall and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds to approve the consent agenda. Deputy City Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Shea.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderall.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker. Aye. Deputy Mayor Becker.
Aye.
Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion is approved. Moving to regular business. Our first item of
Point of
regular.
order. Did you call me?
I thought that I did, but perhaps I didn't.
Okay.
Councilmember Reynolds. Thank you.
Okay. Now we move to regular business, and our first item of regular business is AB 6880, public hearing on interim regulations at MICC 19.16.101. Sorry, 010, related to emergency shelters and housing, traditional housing and permanent supportive housing, ordinance number 26-02, first reading. Okay, the public hearing is now open as of 6:02 p.m. Individuals who register with the city clerk's office for 4 p.m. today may make a public comment on this agenda item. You will be called by name when it is your turn to speak. Please speak audibly, state your name and city of residence for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Deputy City Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public comment that wishes to address the council?
No, Mayor.
Okay. If there is no testimony this evening, the public portion of this hearing is closed as of 6:03 p.m. Now we will welcome CBD Director Jeff Thomas.
Thank you, good mayor. For the record, Jeff Thomas, and joining me for this item is Senior Planner Molly McGuire with CPD. Molly is going to walk you through a very short presentation before we turn it back over to you. I would like to just say before or while Molly is getting her screen ready here to share, this will be the 7th time we've come to you since 2021 with a renewal of these interim regulations. And I'm hopeful this is going to be the last time, as this work will be part of the GMA compliance effort that we will be undertaking here in just a few short months and bringing it back to council mid-year. So with that, Molly, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and we'll walk council through the slides. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as some brief background on House Bill 1220, we can go back even further to 2003 when step housing has been permitted island-wide, where regulations were adopted to permit special needs group housing and social service transitional housing. In 2021, the state passed House Bill 1220, which required amendments to Mercer Island City Code Title 19. And those amendments were done through amending the definitions to special needs group housing and social service transitional housing to include definitions of emergency housing, which I'll get into later. But as Jeff said, between 2022 and 2025, those have been renewed 6 times. And permanent regulations were originally proposed as part of the omnibus ordinance, but were taken out and postponed and are now part of the GMA compliance effort. So these interim regulations will expire on April 2nd of this year if they're not renewed. So they would need to be renewed this month to remain in compliance with House Bill 1220. So House Bill 1220 essentially forbids cities from prohibiting transitional or permanent supportive housing in residential zones or zones where hotels are allowed, and indoor emergency shelters and housing in zones where hotels are allowed. There's also regulations regarding occupancy, spacing, and intensity that must be reasonable, and restrictions cannot be used to prevent the siting of a sufficient number of housing units necessary to meet the projected housing need. There was some guidance published in 2024, which will need to be evaluated for compliance, which our regulations will need to be evaluated for compliance with the House Bill 1220 and this commerce guidance when we develop permanent regulations as part of the GMA compliance, which is due on July 31st, 2026. And so this ordinance renews the interim regulations established by the ordinance 24C-03, which amends 1916-010, the definitions to comply with House Bill 1220, Section 4. And the recommended action is to schedule ordinance number 2602 for a second reading on March 17th, 2026. And that is all I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start a question. Just so everyone is clear and here and maybe watching at home, the permanent regulations for this are set to be done soon in sort of the next batch of regulations that the Planning Commission and the Council is going to be considering. Is that fair?
It is part of the scope for our GMA compliance effort related to the growth board order. That is correct.
Great. Is there a motion to schedule ordinance 2602 for second reading on March 17th, 2026?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Councilmember Weinberg and second by Councilmember Reynolds. Deputy, any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to ask some questions about the public comments that we received via email with regard to emergency shelters throughout the island, and the extent to which that is compliant or non-compliant with state law or more than what state law requires. And if it is, which has been suggested that it is more than state law requires, why are we doing that? And is that going to be in the permanent ordinance?
So council will certainly have an opportunity to answer your question, Councilmember Andral, it is possible that we have overshot that area a little bit. One of the problems with just making immediate changes is there is going to have to be some analysis done before we're able to bring back changes. Certainly in our next step here is to try and get the permanent regulations adopted. It is going to take a little time to go through that process, and we have got that resource scheduled to do that this spring as part of, again, the permanent regulation making process that we want to have done by July 31st.
Mr. Mayor, if I can also add, our legal team has been working on this since this issue was raised last fall. I sent an email to you just a couple of hours ago. I'm sorry you didn't receive it sooner. The staff acknowledged that there's additional work to be done That's why we have interim regulations, because we're still working on it. This item was removed from the omnibus ordinance that you had in front of you last fall so that it could be dealt with more intentionally and with some additional review time. I'd like to say that I can move this to the top of the list, but as you're well aware, we're also working on compliance with the Growth Management Hearing Board's order. Been talking with staff, the step housing permanent regulations and the other regulations we have to adopt as part of that larger order go hand in hand and are being worked at the same time. I just want to reiterate again, your legal team has been working on this. I know they were meeting this week, looking at the step housing regulations. And so the work is moving. We do not have an opportunity. We do not have time between now and April 2nd to put permanent regulations in place. We need the additional time to work on the permanent regulations. So I would respectfully request that you move forward on adopting the interim regulations so that we maintain compliance with state law.
And I'd just like to say that I will likely be voting in favor of these interim regulations as they've been in place for some time, and the continuity that we need to continue to be in compliance and the time we need for permanent. But if the permanent regulations include emergency shelters throughout the island as opposed to just in zones where hotels are allowed, I will be voting against them.
And Councilmember Anderl, I want to make just clear for the record, that is not the intent.
Okay. Yeah. My hand is down.
All good? Okay. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a reminder, Councilmember Weinberg made the motion and Councilmember Reynolds seconded it. Councilmember Anderl.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Shea.
Aye.
Councilmember Weicker. Aye. Mayor Rosenbaum.
Aye.
And Councilmember Reynolds.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Our next item of business is AB 6881, review of city facility strategy community survey results. We welcome City Manager Jesse Bond, Senior Management Analyst Robbie Cunningham Adams.
All right. Good evening, Council. Again, for the record, Robbie Cunningham Adams, Senior Management Analyst in the Senior Manager's Office. Tonight, we are reviewing the results of the City Facilities Survey. You can go ahead and share your screen on the front slide and get a chance there, Ian. As a reminder, Council, during your January 6th meeting, you approved funding to do a statistically valid survey and an open public survey to gather input from the community about last November's Public Safety and Maintenance Facility Proposition 1 and the city facility strategy going forward. So the purpose was to learn what happened last fall in the election and what are priorities for the community going forward. We selected a consultant who's here with me to help us do that work. And so I'm joined by Ian Stewart. Ian is a partner with Fulcrum Strategy Group, firm he started with longtime colleagues this year after spending 27 years at EMC Research. Fulcrum is a nationwide opinion research firm serving a wide range of clients from both public and the private sector, including numerous East Side cities, including King County, East Side cities, and the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce. Ian's done this a lot, including for the city of Mercer Island in the past with our parks levy measures in the past and other city, approval and satisfaction surveys in the past as well. And so with that, we selected Ian. Ian worked with city staff and with the council select committee of Deputy Mayor Becker, Councilmember Reynolds, Councilmember Weicker. We came up with a great set of questions and we're here to go into the results. So with that, I'm going to put it over to Ian, make sure your mic's on. And Ian's going to walk us through the results. You're going to see a lot of data, a lot of charts. I guess the mayor, deputy mayor, happy to go through the whole thing and take questions at the end, but it's pretty dense. So if anyone has, I have a question about a slide or a data point, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt us and we can dive into a discussion. With that, I'll leave it to you, Ian.
Great. Thank you. Looks like my mic is on. My name is Ian Stewart. Nice to see you all this evening. I will get started. And as Robbie said, please do stop me whenever you feel like it. So I was asked to do a little bit of background on how random sampling works and how we approach this work, which will give you a sense of methodologically how we did the survey. When you think about doing a random selection survey, it's a bit like this metaphor of tasting soup, right? So if you take a spoonful of soup after it's mixed up, you get a good sense of the flavor without having to eat the whole pot of soup. So when we think about this, that jar at the right, I think of them as every potential respondent in our universe. And we start with that larger set of everyone possibly that's possible to get selected. From that known universe, which is in this case, every eligible voter in the city of Mercer Island, we then shuffle that universe. We shake up the marbles and then we draw them at random. And when we draw that sample at random, we essentially achieve the responses within a known margin of error, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. We then achieve our survey with that random selection with reducing bias. So our intro, if you were to look at it, it's very generic. You don't know who's calling you for the reason or what the survey is about necessarily when you start. That's on purpose because if someone decides not to participate, that means they're not doing it because of the topic at hand. They're just doing it because they don't have time or they don't take surveys, whatever it might be, which is fine because it doesn't affect our sampling effect, right? You can see how that would work. We then make multiple attempts to reach someone. So for example, if Robbie was selected and was living in the island, we tried to reach him. We would reach him, maybe try it the evening if we were doing it by phone. We'd do it again the next morning and then wait a couple of days and try him again before we replace him with somebody else also randomly selected, right? And if you think about it, we kind of live next to where each other lives. The demographics are similar. So if you get somebody on the south end, we make another random selection, probably get someone else that's the south end again and represent the universe geographically, demographically, and so forth. We then look at the known universe. In this instance, that's all voters. And because we know that universe, we have that from regular updates to the universe, we know what that universe should look like at the end of the day when we're done collecting the data on the survey. In this instance, it's unusual that we don't have to wait. We did not have to wait our data at all. The demographics look very much like what we expect the total voter universe to look like on the city of Mercer Island, which is going to be different than all residents. So we can talk about that again at the end. So with that background then, think about other examples of reducing bias. So as I said, the generic introduction, they're not refusing based on the topic because they don't have time. There's a good bet that respondents probably know who the sponsor is, but they don't really know because we never confirm it for them until tonight. Now, anyone who did the survey will go, oh, wait a minute, I remember that. I remember being surveyed for this and now they know who the sponsor was. We include data from people who completed the entire survey. So you're not looking at partial responses here. Anybody who did a partial response, they're eliminated. We replace them with a randomly selected person. And throughout the survey then, and we can go into this in more detail if you're interested, we offered balanced scales. So there are 4-point scales. They're going to have 2 on one side that are positive, 2 on the other side that are negative as an example. And then the clarifications, if it's a live interviewer, the clarifications are always done the same way. So if someone says, well, what is that supposed to mean? The interviewer then says the question back to them. So they're not trying to lead them in some way. They're not trying to guide them in some other way. If you want interested, you can listen to these surveys. It's pretty interesting. If you're doing it yourself, you're looking at the same response each time. So the 1 to 7 scale. So this survey specifically ended up about 400 interviews, and this is a margin of error chart. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, why don't you do a bunch of interviews? Why not? Well, really, at some point, it doesn't matter anymore. We're getting diminishing returns as we move up the list. And if you look at the sample size universe, 400 is a really comfortable place to be. We do that often at the city or county-wide level, 400 interviews. Sometimes we do higher, 500 or 600. But on the island, we actually have a limit of the number of interviews we can do because the population is just not that big. If you're doing the city of Seattle, we could do 600, 800, or 1,000 without any issue. But you can see margin of error-wise, we don't lose all that much in terms of our overall power for the overall results. The margin of error results you're going to see about 5 points in any direction, one way or the other. So this survey, to get into more of the results now, this was a survey of voters, a mixed mode, which means we used landline and cell phones, but mostly cell phones these days. There's still a few people you can imagine we might reach on landlines. You can imagine that demographic. Email and text to web, so that people are doing this on a device of some kind, a phone or a computer, via that email and text message invitation. If they were done by telephone, these are all in English by trained professional interviewers. The text invitations were sent with that link to the web survey. So again, it's a generic invitation that they're receiving. We did allow multiple completes per household, although we did not actually have to use that. I mean, there were only 5 of them that we got multiple completes per household. As I mentioned, 400 total interviews, the margin of error right around that 5 percentage point number at the 95% confidence interval, which is another way of saying if we repeat the survey 95 times out of 100, you're going to see the same results to within that plus or minus 5% point margin of error. When you think about margin of error, if it's on the far ends of things, so if it's an 80-20 response, our margin of error actually gets even better. So it really, the 50-50 is where that full 5 point could be 5 points higher or lower comes into play. And then finally, we did the survey January 28th to the 11th, February and 26th recently. So let's get into the results, unless there are other demographic or methodological questions. Okay. One of the first questions we ask, if you look at the lower left-hand corner, you'll see the question text of what we asked. This is very early in the survey. Are things going in the right direction, or they gotten pretty seriously off on the wrong track? That pretty seriously is intentional language. I've asked it the same way for about 30 years as a company, in one form or another. The right direction number and the wrong track is usually a combination of a variety of things. Mostly this is about how do we feel about things of life on Mercer Island. And it's pretty good. It's 78 right direction and 17% wrong track. We can talk about some comparisons that are made from previous surveys, but we'll get into that at the end. Next, again, question lower left-hand corner. We call this the most important problem. It's an open-ended response. And open-ends means that people can tell us whatever they think. They can say a word, a paragraph. We take that and put it back into these response categories. So obviously, the person that said growth and development, they might have told us a story for a minute or two about what's going on there. Or they might have just said it's growth, there's too much, or something like that. If you look at that, growth and development there at 12%, we usually say about 10 points is a significant response, an open-ended response. So we have, 3 of them that are right around 10 and only 1 above 12. There's no concentration though here. If you were looking at other communities, you would see other items, especially Seattle's a great example. Homelessness, crime, things like that into the 30s and 40s in terms of open-ended responses. This gives you a sense of what's happening in the island right now. A whole bunch of items that are small percentages that people are concerned about. As you move down the list, particularly for tonight, city facilities and municipal buildings next to the bottom there at 3%. I had to keep going until I got to that 3% number, but it is there. It does register among a whole bunch of other items on the list. Other actually, as a whole collection of probably 1% mentions that people said that just don't make the cut. On the next slide, we're doing a series of questions. These are, there's one of these that are not in a randomized order. The job the Mercer Island City government does overall. This is rated on a scale of excellent, good, only, fair, and poor. So 2 positive, 2 negatives, and then an unoffered middle. If you wanted to offer, you could. You could say, I'm not sure. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm showing you on the far right, the excellent and poor, the 2 most extreme on those ratings. So that one is asked out of order. The other 3 are asked randomized. You see me do that a lot in the survey where we randomize things because then not any respondent is receiving the same question in the same order, right? They're all receiving a different order for that. As you move through the list here, the first one, the job the Mercer Island City government does overall, pretty strong at almost 70% positive, 25% negative. As you move down the list, that we get more specific, you're seeing differences in those ratings. The job the city does spending tax dollars responsibly, that's 54-34 in terms of positive or negative, although the excellent and poor are just about even in those 2. Whereas in the first one, the excellent's about 2 or 3 times the poor. The job Mercer Island City government does providing city services and maintaining city infrastructure is pretty good at 73-78, both higher than the job overall that the city's doing. So you can see as we dig into the ratings here, things vary a little bit depending on which question you're asking about.
Well, Keith, stay at this slide. I see a few
Sure.
hands raised. Do we want to do questions now or?
Councilor Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. Is there any explanation about the logic behind driving some of these answers? Because to me, there's a complete disconnect with how can 73 or 78% of the people think we're doing a great job maintaining the infrastructure and providing city services, which is where all the money is spent, and think we're not doing such a great job spending the tax dollars.
I think it's fair to say that.
Do we have any insight into that? That just doesn't
sure.
click for me.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that is, first of all, you can see there's 13% that have no opinion. So there's a group of people who are thinking, I don't know what the city spends money on at all. I don't know how to answer this question. So you could actually say those 13 might give it a better rating if they knew more about it. But that's the other challenge of city government is that most people don't pay nearly as much attention as you to what's happening to the city budget, right? They have their own budgets to worry about, got their own concerns and life that they're managing. So for a lot of people, I think they're being more critical of government generally. That's the way you could walk away with this understanding. But on the flip side of that, those 2 that you see direct evidence of the city providing services, we should feel pretty good about that they're much higher even than the rating overall.
Councilor Reynolds.
I actually had almost an identical question, but I was going to ask it a slightly different angle on it. Is that sort of disconnect between using tax dollars wisely and general impression of how the city's doing? Is that unusual? Do other cities see that as well?
I would start by saying usually cities don't see good ratings for the job they're doing overall. If you were to compare to your neighboring cities, Mercer Island is looking a bit better than other cities. But no, we see that disconnect all the time, especially because the evidence of what I see on the ground, I experience the city's services in a very different way. The generic version of how are you spending my tax dollars? It's a far more difficult question to answer because it's all the tax dollars. And do I know what the city spends on all its tax dollars? No. So it's a lot easier to be critical on that kind of question.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, continue. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, you can see how we're sort of doing questions in an order where we're releasing a little bit of information at a time. So the next question here on the far left Have you heard, read, or seen anything about proposals for new city government buildings on Mercer Island? This is about the least specific we could make it while still giving some indication of what we were after. But obviously, we're sort of tipping our hand a little bit on this question. I won't claim this is entirely unbiased, but there's really not a great way to ask this and get the response. You saw the unaided version when we asked the most important problem at 3%, right? So if we aid it now, we're getting almost 70% saying that. Of course, they're self-selecting them, saying that, yes, I've heard something about this. We move them on to say, all right, well, what have you heard? On the right side, that's all that 70% that said yes, 69%. Moving to the right and saying, all right, tell me specifically in an open end, what have you seen? On New City Hall, a permit center at 16%. It was too expensive to raise taxes. They're literally going all the way to the November measure we're going to be asking about in a few minutes. It was voted on or a failed measure. You can see there's various versions of this that are somewhat more generic all the way to specific. So new police station, EMS or improved public safety, pretty specific, right, of an answer. Whereas some of these other ones, general building and development, that's much more generic. About 11% said that. So there's a collection of answers here among that 70%. People who actually could tell us what they think is happening specifically. This is the way to understand just how aware are people of what are we talking about here. We wanted to follow it up with another version of this. And again, this is also self-offered. These are randomized questions, but our question was, tell us how aware you think you are of each of these three specific items. How aware are you that City Hall closed, that the police department is operating out of temporary trailers, and that many systems in the city's public work buildings are failing and need to be replaced? So once again, this is a self-offered version of this, but the awareness there you can see in almost every instance, about a quarter, just over that, are saying, I haven't heard at all about that. So this is asking of everyone. See, when you ask yourself, when we go out in the community and talk and people say, I don't know what's happening. Well, there's a solid third that actually don't. They're not paying attention at all to what's happening in regards to these buildings. And as you move to the other three items, the very aware ranges anywhere from almost half down to a third. So to make the assumption that people are following along, as we talked about a minute ago, with how taxes are being spent, and then to this level of detail, right? It's hard for people to follow that because how much time are they giving you, the city council proceedings and what's happening in city government? So moving on, we then did our next question. This question is the text. We essentially repeated the November 2025 measure and then said, you may or may not have voted on this, but tell us if you did, which way did you vote? Or if you hadn't, which way would you have voted? Or maybe you wouldn't have voted at all and you would have skipped it. On the left is what we got in the survey, 55% yes, and then a collection of other no plus the other responses. Either people said they wouldn't have voted on it or they didn't know. The actual election results, as you recall, is 55-45. So we were almost like dead on with that, with what we saw in our survey here. So then moving forward, we said to ask everybody, all right, whatever way you voted, or maybe you didn't vote, what do you think was the best reason to support this measure? You can see a collection of items here. Once again, this is an open-ended answer. So we're looking at anything above 10% being significant again. And in terms of a connection to the actual item, you can see new and updated facilities, pretty good, but less generic. Updated municipal buildings, that one, the third one down, that's pretty specific, right? So we're actually seeing now some specific connections. But again, you think about driving down to the level of awareness, right? We're getting now here to people who voted on this. The level of awareness is not that high, like specific recall of what's happening, what's going on here. And then 8% actually said, there's no reason to support it, I opposed it. But again, this is asked of both people who voted yes and who voted no, right? We did the same thing for those on the other side and said, right, what's the best reason to oppose it? Now, if I go back and forth, you're already noticing the concentration of answers here among cost and expense, right? And the next one, the tax increases and high taxes. Those two together is a majority of the answers. You move to the rest of these, go back and forth, right? You can see there's definitely a much higher concentration here of connection on the opposition side. And again, these are yes voters who said, I heard this, and that's what I think the best reason to oppose this measure was. So clearly, and this is one of my first conclusions here, that this measure got the brand of being too expensive. Whatever number you might have had in your head, people connected it with being too expensive. Moving on, we then wanted to dig into this even further. So this is a series of agree, disagree questions. Again, these are all randomized, so no one is appearing in the same order for anybody. The scale here is going from strongly agree and somewhat agree. That's the blue. The dark blue is the strongly agree, so the most intense on the scale. On the far right, the somewhat disagree and the strongly disagree. The somewhat disagree is like sort of light orange, and the dark orange is the strongly disagree. These are ranked in order of agreement as we move down the list, right? And these are a series of questions that sort of investigate why the measure might not have reached 60%. What were the reasons you think? The size of the property tax increase made many people vote against it. That is far and away the number one agreement on this list. 43% strongly agree, another 43% somewhat agree, 86% total. So if you're walking with nothing else, right? The brand of the November 25 measure was, the property tax was too big. Now, we can all argue about how big it actually was, but this was the brand that it got. Right. The next one, people were concerned the city would not spend the money wisely. The intensities dropped off here, right, from 43 to 23, but the somewhat agree at 52%. That's still a concern. That's about the 70-ish%, 75%. I believe the city needs a new facility, but there are features that should be cut to make the next measure cost less. This one, 27% strongly agree, 38% somewhat agree. To me, this is one of the most important questions in the survey because it allows you a path to move forward. You're looking forward and saying, all right, is there something we can do to bring the sides back together again in some way? And this gets, well above 60%, like 65-ish% there, with another 4% saying, I'm not quite sure, 20% on the some disagree side. So there's some room to move here. Talk about that more in a few minutes. As you move through the rest of this list, city was not transparent enough on how the money would be spent. The city already has enough money. This is where we start to get the disagreement on the majority side, right? So city has enough money? No, actually, majority said no to that. Almost 60% said that. 13% weren't sure. So once again, this group coming back that, it's not exactly sure what the city's doing, whether they have the money or not. I won't support some new city buildings until a school one passes. A little moot now, but that's into the 70s there. The disagree and the strongly disagree really jumps up in these last few, right? I oppose any tax increase regardless of what the money is used for, 57%, and another 22% somewhat disagree. Location was wrong. That's clearly not it, although the intensity is down a little bit there. The city should never ask for it because it doesn't need any new buildings. This is the disagreement there, almost 60%. And the strongly disagree, 28% somewhat. So clearly, there are some items that people are gravitating towards that do explain the vote in 25, and some other ones that are clearly not what's happening in the vote for 2025, at least by their admission. Any questions there before we move on?
Is it possible, obviously you're talking about a sample size of under 200 at this point, but is it possible to get these answers for people who also self-reported voting no?
Yes, that's actually my next slide. But
let's move on then.
But unless there are other questions on this before I do that. Okay, one more slide just to highlight this one specifically. We'll go into details on what you just asked in a minute. So I wanted to pull this one out because this is exactly what you just asked. This question of yes and no. If we have an agreement here that the city does need a new facility, but maybe we could cut some things, what happens if you ask the yes voters and the no voters that? You can see they actually split here. So yes, there's a chance for us to work together, but there's also some yes voters who were, especially in that disagree category, like, I think you got it right. And I might not be okay with cutting some things out of that because I think you were on the right trajectory here. Right? Whereas on the no side, 78% agree with that. So we've got kind of a split here in this question as you move forward between yes and no voters. You move forward. Did you want to add something to that, Robbie? No?
Oh, keep going.
All right. So on the next slide, you can look at all these. This is pretty busy, but I think just to give you a key to how to read it, the agree and disagree have been combined here. The yes is the first line, the no is the second line. So yes voters on the first line, no voters on the second line for each one of these items. And you can see there are some differences in how people are thinking about this. Almost universal agreement on the size of the property tax, that first one, right? They're both almost the same on the agree. People were concerned the city wouldn't spend the money wisely. More agreement with that among the no voters than the yes voters. I believe the city needs a new facility, but needs to cut. We just looked at that one, 78-53. The city is not transparent. We're seeing the yes voters start to drop a little bit now as you move down the list, right? And then the no voters is more likely to say yes here. As you move through the list, the city already has the money. It doesn't need a new tax increase. Yes voters only 18%, but the no voters 41% agree with that. So some interesting differences here. There's this sort of group of the no voters who are holding on to some perception, whatever, valid or not, perceptions that they have is what they're holding on to. You should know about them before you move forward with this. And the last items of these, I think one of the most interesting ones, you look at the location numbers and the city should never ask for it. These are starting to drop, but they're about that, 28%, about a quarter we're seeing here, which are still pretty solid saying, I don't want to vote for this because I don't, it's in the wrong place or you don't need the money. So there still are some reasons among both yes and no voters to be hesitant about this in various degrees. I'm not sure who that yes voter is who said I oppose any tax increase. I guess they made an exception for this one when they voted yes, but.
And council, this slide was added yesterday. It's not in your packet. Staff will update the link in the packet to the updated kind of final presentation here. I know it's pretty small text and a lot of information to take in right now, but we'll be sure to share it out with you. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out after the meeting too.
Okay.
But even so, this would be answering the question of, from a yes voter's perspective, they believe that someone who voted no did so because obviously the property tax increase was the number one reason. It's not necessarily their personal opinion, it's their perception of the.
That's right. Yeah. If you look at the intro question, do you agree or disagree with each statement? And these are generic enough that you could agree without it being your own personal opinion. Right. In some instances. In other instances, it is in fact your personal opinion that you're reflecting. So yes. But in that instance, again, the yes voters are saying, I think it's because of the size of the property tax that other people voted no. So, and the no voters are saying that for sure. So,
Okay.
okay. We have just, I think just one more slide and then we're closing things out. So on this next one, we do on a series of a 1 to 7 scale, the question text is here at the bottom. How much of our priority are each of these items? 1 means it's not important at all. 7 is extremely important. You can use any number on the scale. On this scale, you can see a midpoint would be 4. So I'm showing you everything over a 4 on this. The 5 and 6 are grouped together in that light green. The 7 is the most intense, the extremely important, and it is organized by the total of 5, 6, and 7s together. But the 7s are really important here, right? Because if you choose a 7, it really gives us an easy way to understand intensity behind these answers. If you look, there's kind of a group of 3 at the top there. The permanent home for the police department, maintaining our Park Street and utility maintenance program, and building new facilities so that they can survive an essential earthquake. Those 3 are both together kind of overall in the extremely important and in the total importance. There is a little bit of a gap in there, but you can see they're kind of grouped together. The next group of 3 is the public works, the city employees permanent home, and in-person customer service option. Those 3 kind of group together in terms of overall intensity. Drops off a little for the in-person customer for service center for the overall importance, but kind of in the same category there, well above 60%. The intensity drops off on the covered facility here, right? Only 13% saying that. Same with the green buildings. And then this one is kind of unrelated to the building, which is building new parks and trails and other parts of the island that don't currently have them. So we go to the end of the list here. It's not as if these are things you shouldn't be doing. It's just in terms of overall importance, they're not outranking these other items on the scale. But it makes sense to you. Like, for example, I wouldn't necessarily not build the new building with 2 green standards. It's just that that's not as important as making sure that it's earthquake safe. So I'm going to move to my conclusions, and then I've got some other questions that were asked I want to refer back to, unless there are other questions before I do that. No? Okay, good. So we looked at the outlook overall, which is really positive, especially on some elements of government performance, although it dropped off as you saw. We asked about responsible tax dollar usage, and we talked about why that might be. That's a harder question to answer. We did find that a large majority of voters have some level of awareness of what's happening with civic buildings, but there's a persistence quarter that said they're not aware. Like they told us, I have not paid attention to this at all. Even when they were given the chance to answer, they said, no, I haven't paid attention. So that's something you're gonna have to grapple with. The strongest association with that November 2025 measure was its cost and the property tax increase. Whatever else happened, that's clearly the brand that it got. And then when we talked about the other reasons people might have rejected the measure, the city doesn't need the money, already has it, doesn't need the building, or it's the wrong location. Those were clearly things that people disagreed with, kind of whether you're yes or no. People were disagreeing with those items. It does appear like there's support for a new facility if it costs less, but as you saw, there's that split between the yes and no voters that you're gonna have to work on. And then finally, a lot of the priorities that you saw for a new facility are seen as important, indicating there is some room for agreement here. You've got some path to move forward. And quite frankly, this feels a lot like the other projects I've done for both the island, the city, and for the Mercer Island School District, where we said no one time, we got back together, worked on it, talked about it, planned it together, and then got to yes the next time. The school district just did that. The school district's done it in the past. The city's done it on this very building in the past. That was my first projects here. So that's all I think in your future. A couple other items I wanted to mention. We did in fact have an open survey. I don't know if you wanted to address that first before I did.
Yeah, so the series of questions that we kind of present the results of in the statistical survey, we essentially asked the exact same set of questions in an open link that went out in our city communication channels. Anyone in the island was given the opportunity to fill out that survey. It was open for several weeks. It closed on Sunday. Just to make sure anyone, we want to get as much public engagement and feedback as possible. Obviously, the difference between like a statistically tailored survey and a survey where anyone can open it is a little different, but it gives us that much more kind of public input and ideas. And Ian, I think we're going to share the kind of full results of that to you all within this week, and we'll post results online. But I think, Ian, you have maybe like a high level summary of how it compares to the statistically valid survey.
Yeah, one of the reasons to do an open survey, as you just described, is to give everyone a chance to participate. But it also comes with a challenge, which is we don't know who's coming to take the survey. So there are a few differences to note there. The yes vote's only about 50% there, where it was 55 in this survey. Most of the responses are generally aligned, but there is more negativity toward the city government. So sort of spending tax dollars, performance on some of these items. There's also even more agreement that this question right here, because I think it was among the most important. I just want to make sure I get it. So online, the agree on the city needs a new facility, but features should be cut was 41% strongly and 28% somewhat. So quite a bit different. There's even more agreement there that the city should come back with something that's cut a little bit. The priorities here are just about the same, right? This list And then finally, the demographics, there's a lot higher refusal rates. A lot more people are saying I wasn't going to give you my answers, but it is generally older and longer term residents from what you could see in that from the open survey. There was a second question about, let's see, which slide was this? It was slide 8, but I think it's moved now. No, it was this one. So you had a survey done citywide in 2024, different methodology that was done via, I believe, a mail survey, either filled out or back to the web. So in that one, some of these same questions, but I actually believe were a holdover from my previous work way back when. The government overall question here, and that survey was 71% positive, 29% negative. The tax dollars responsibly question was 55 positive, 27 negative. So a bit more negative on this one. So those are really the only questions that I saw that were a direct parallel between the two. Most of the other questions, there isn't a direct parallel. In some way, the scale's off, the question text is different. So can really do a bunch of other comparisons. The last question was on demographic differences. So if you were to look at the US Census, the under 65 population on the island is 81%, over 65 is 19%. But if you take out the under 18s, which is a much more direct comparison to what I just did, the under 65 is 75, over is 25. In our survey, it's 68, under 32 over. So a bit older, but makes sense. If you're going to voters, we're going to get a little older. And then other demographic comparisons that I want to make sure you knew. The gender was basically the same as you can see in the census. Ownership is the same, and education levels a little higher in the survey than you'd see in the census overall, which again makes some sense. Are there other questions that I haven't answered that I could for you?
Oh, yes. Councilor Andrew. Stop.
Thanks. And I don't know if I know how to answer this question, but I mean, if you're asking yes voters something, does the fact that they already voted yes and that they believe that that was the right thing to do, does that kind of skew their answers to other questions? They're kind of clinging to the position that they thought that it was the right thing in the first place, and they don't want to kind of back off of that to say, like, whether the question specifically was where the yes voters weren't as enthusiastic about downsizing the project. So do you think that's just because they voted yes and backtracking on that makes them feel weird about their original yes vote?
I think it's a good theory. If you were to vote yes on that and say, I think you have the right package, I like what was in there. The second question as a yes voter you're being asked here is what would be cut? If I liked all those things and thought they were a good idea, this is also, we also can't exactly tell them that on this survey. So if I'm a yes voter and you're telling me I'm going to cut something and you say, well, if you got the earthquake preparedness, that seems like a bad idea. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but so it doesn't necessarily mean that if we do make a smaller package, that any of the yes voters are going to be offended or vote no.
Not necessarily, but it's something to be aware of. That if they thought you were on the right track and we're going to say, well, now we're not going to do this or this. I don't think that's where you're heading here. We're not talking about wholesale changes here. You still need the things that you need. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions here, but I'll start with one on the agree disagree slide. I don't know if you want to bring this up or not, but on the yes no breakdown, I'm curious what to make of all the ones where the yes voters said ostensibly no on these slides, saying no, I won't vote for it until the schools pass. No, I won't ever vote for it. And some of these are pretty significant. I mean, you have 18% of people saying city already has the money and does not need a tax increase, but voted yes. 20% saying I won't ever support it until school law passes, but voted yes. And then you mentioned the 12%, and the 12% is smaller, but I think 20% is a sizable number of people to say I won't vote for it. And so I did.
Yeah. So part of this is one, margin of error, right? Because we are talking about a smaller universe here. So it tends to do that. Two, we only are showing the agree. So this is the strongly and somewhat. So I don't know how much is in somewhat there.
Yeah.
And you can hold two things in your head at the same time and say, I voted yes, but I also think you got some money to throw around.
Yeah,
so as long as it's not overwhelming in one of these instances, that's where I would really be concerned, right? If the yes voters were way off on something, you go, that doesn't make any sense of why they would be in that instance.
Okay. Sounds good.
Councilor Weicker.
So general math, 25% are going to be a no matter what. 30 are going to be yes. It's that middle. We need to get to the 60, right? Is that sort of, from all your data, is that sort of the 20, 30, and 50?
In general, I think it's hard. It's going to be really hard to push that to whatever you're coming up with next. Right? I think that's a fair place to say that's where we're starting from.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
This is an easier question. So you said on one of the earlier slides, you had 31% of the people were not aware of that we needed new facilities or that we were asking new facilities.
This one?
If you go back one even more, but basically that.
Oh,
this one. But you had previously said that you thought that this was kind of a leading question and that we're like prompting people about it. I mean, do you think that the leading question would make some people say, yes, I'm aware, like I just told you. So presumably the number of people who were unaware of this is even higher than 31%.
Yeah. I mean, I think that how do you ask about,
right.
Don't think of an elephant, right? You can't really
Right,
do that
right.
in this instance. So this is, but if 31% self-offered, no, I haven't heard anything about it. You
Yeah.
can tell they're not paying attention to any of this discussion.
Yeah.
So, but yes, there's a response bias here for sure. What you just told me, of course I heard about that, right?
Okay.
But it could be anything, right? It could be anything about it might not be the number of measure we're talking about. It could be City Hall, it could be community center, it could be, right? It could be any number of things that are being included here. So the net is a bit wider.
I think it's fair to say sometimes when someone asks you, do you know something, it's embarrassing to say you don't know it.
Yeah.
So
Right. I'm mostly just saying like, I mean, I think 31% is a lot of people who weren't aware. And so if we think it's probably higher than 31%.
Yes.
Is even more than a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Might also be some noise in there from the school bond too.
Yeah.
Might be higher than it is. Councilor Reynolds.
This is something that hadn't occurred to me until recently, but I think you said you surveyed registered voters, correct? Around 10% of the island is not a citizen and therefore not a registered voter. There's some other non-registered voters too, but I guess it makes sense that we survey registered voters because we're trying to figure out how to pass this thing. But is there any precedent or way of knowing how the non-citizens feel about this, given they use city services and pay taxes as well? I'd like to know what they think as well, even if they don't have a literal vote in this.
I would point you to the open survey as one measure of that, which will help a little bit, although again, we don't quite know who's coming. The second thing is the concentric circles of population on the island, the registered voter population to the all residents is actually a lot closer than it is in most other places. If you were to go to other parts of Washington, you'd see that the registered voter population is very different from the overall population, right? The overall population's younger, more diverse, lots of other things that you might see. Mercer Island, the overlap is smaller. So you're still representing a lot of, like 80% of all residents with voters. Of course, cutting out the 18, right? We can go through those numbers again if you're interested, but there's a lot of them are represented here in that. So, but certainly that is a choice we made and we haven't included them. So we have to make some assumptions about what's happening there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate all your work on this. I think obviously it's really important that we get this feedback from the community. I mean, from my perspective, 9 out of 10 people think that it's important that we build a new facility for emergency management and police and emergency services. And also I think there's a large number of folks that had concerns about the price. So I think, we kind of have our work cut out for us here, but I think we have directionally, a little more focus than we did an hour ago. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Craig, was that an old hand?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our next item of regular business is AB 6872, Sustainability Work Program Annual Update. Welcome Chief of Operations Jason Kittner and Sustainability Program Manager Alana De Rogatis.
Mr. Mayor, just give us a couple minutes here to switch folks out.
Certainly. Whenever Jason tells us we're ready, we'll.
Always.
All right.
Hi, good evening, City Council. My name is Alana De Rogatis. I am the city's Sustainability Program Manager. And I'm going to go ahead this evening and give you some updates on what we've been working on in terms of implementing the climate action plan. So give me one moment to get my slides on the screen. Okay, so this evening we're going to be running through a quick review of just the climate action plan and the targets that the city adopted regarding greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Some 2025 project highlights, notably the 2024 greenhouse gas report, which was published at the beginning of this year, the results of our 2025 PSE Green Power campaign, the Energy Smart East Side program, which is a heat pump program, which I'll give some details on shortly. And one notable omission from the project highlights is our EV charging infrastructure plan development process, because that is the next agenda item this evening. So I won't be getting into that here. Following some project highlights, just going to talk about the Climate Action Plan implementation dashboard that's recently been published on the city website separately from the greenhouse gas report results. And just a kind of quick overview of what is coming up in 2026. So just to briefly review, the Climate Action Plan was adopted by City Council in April of 2023. Consists of 59 actions divided into 6 different focused areas. And all of those actions are to help guide the city to a more strategic roadmap for achieving the greenhouse gas reduction goals that had been adopted previously and are in alignment with other cities in King County. So our most near target is 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to a 2007 baseline by the year 2030. So it is coming up. Jumping right in to where we're at right now, as of 2024, so we always do the year kind of in arrears for the greenhouse gas reporting, just based on data availability. So this is our most recent community level greenhouse gas report. You can see the main sources of emissions are electricity, natural gas, and primarily on-road vehicles on Mercer Island. Just to kind of summarize some of the key findings, we're down not quite a percentage point compared to 2023. And regarding our 2030 target of a 50% reduction, we're currently down 8% versus that 2007 baseline. One notable thing to point out, though, is that we're actually down 21% in per capita emissions compared to 2007. So per person on the island, emissions have decreased. So kind of just showing that over time, population has increased, but we are actually, still decreasing and significantly per person. So one other finding is that municipal operations decreased further 14% in emissions compared to 2023. However, a significant portion of that reduction is due to the transition of the East Side Fire and Rescue buildings that they operate now and their fleet vehicles off of our reporting. And that's in alignment with how other cities that have EFR services handle their reporting for emissions. So just to clarify that we're not trying to claim further reductions that we actually earned. So this is just kind of a high level snapshot of what the dashboard looks like on the city website. You can go in and click and drill down into like the very specifics of the different focus areas with the built environment, solid waste, and transportation, and kind of see exactly like consumption of electricity at different like residential versus commercial, and a lot of different ways to kind of view that data. So yes, we can go ahead and ask questions whenever.
Yeah, I didn't know, I was out of the room, I didn't know what the protocol was.
Yeah.
So are we responsible for the emissions created by Sound Transit for the portion of the rail line that is on the island?
That's not going to be included in any of our reporting. It's going to probably show up in a little bit of the community level when they do like, it's tough to kind of quantify because a lot of this is done via modeling. So we do models for a lot of our transportation emissions because we can't really measure it super concretely. So it will have some level of impact at a very high level, but hopefully it's going to be bringing down our vehicle miles traveled in terms of passenger vehicles. So
we'll see.
We shall see. But I don't expect that to have a huge impact in terms of added emissions from Sound Transit, but I won't be able to see it granularly.
And I meant not the Sound Transit operations, but the Sound Transit construction.
Oh, the construction?
Yeah, like all the concrete.
So all of that construction work would have already happened, and anything that was on Mercer Island, we only would have been capturing it if it was reported to King County as like originating from Mercer Island. So any of that would have already been accounted for in these prior years before I joined the city. So not quite sure what that data looked like. All right, if there's no other questions, I will move right along. So one of the early actions from the Climate Action Plan was to hold another green power campaign with PSE. There had been one many years ago on Mercer Island that was very successful. So essentially, the PSE Green Power Program is an opt-in program that any customers of PSE can opt to have their electricity usage offset with renewable energy, and you can do up to 100% of your billed amount of electricity consumption. And so essentially asking folks to choose to enroll in this program to have their electricity matched with renewables. So we were hoping to get another 100 enrollments in this program in 2025, and we far exceeded our goal. We achieved over 100 new signups by August of last year, and then we ended the year with 142 total new enrollments. So at the beginning of the campaign, PSE had pledged $10,000 towards a new community solar project on the island for achieving this goal. And since we exceeded it by so much, they added another $2,500 onto that award amount. So we have $12,500 that is going to a new project that I am still finalizing the details for and hope to be able to share that in coming months. Yes.
I just want to say congratulations. That's awesome
Thank
and
you.
well done. That's really hard to do.
All the work was to the community who opted in and enrolled. So thank you to them. All right. So finally, for some of the project highlights, just wanted to just give the latest updates for the Energy Smart Eastside program. So I've mentioned this program in our previous updates. So it's a joint program that we do as part of the Eastside Climate Partnership with a total of 6 cities on the east side. And this program is primarily right now aimed at encouraging the adoption of heat pumps. So in electrifying home heating, that is a huge opportunity to drive down greenhouse gas emissions in residential homes, as home heating is really one of the largest sources of energy use on Mercer Island as residential electricity and natural gas is one of our largest contributors to our emissions, but also just in general in terms of energy consumption in the home, heating is the largest source. So this program educates residents on the benefits of heat pumps and provides incentives based on income qualification and also just a general rebate for anybody who goes to get a heat pump through this program. So in 2025, we saw 26 total heat pump installations. 20 of them used the rebate program. So you could see the kind of breakdown of on the right side of the screen is the total number of program heat pump installations of all time, which I believe we're at 52 now. So the vast majority of those have been market rate. So that means that the only incentive that somebody received was just an equipment discount. Our rebate program is the one that we stack on top of that. So there's the equipment discount plus that's for moderate income. So we give a slight additional bump there in terms of financial incentive. And then the boost program, which is a quarter of our installs, is ones that we have fully funded for income qualified households. The vast majority of our funding for that program has come through grants, and the whole program, we've seen a ton of really awesome grant funding that we received from the state and also PSE. Yes.
Yeah. So I mentioned at the King County Climate Cities Collaboration meeting on, I guess it was Monday of this week, about this program. And I remember hearing from some of the attendees who are not from the east side that they would love to create a similar program in North Seattle. And I wanted to follow up after the meeting, see if we can figure out, or an email is fine, to see if we can help them identify how K4C got started, because they're seeing numbers like these of 459 heat pumps on the east side, 26 of which that last year were here. And they're like, wow, they can really work together and get a lot more done together than individually. So this is a great work.
Yeah, this program has been really successful and also just very helpful in terms of kind of shared resources. Not something that we would have been able to put on by ourselves. So absolutely, I think through like K4C and other sort of collaborations with other cities is kind of the way that we can all pool resources and share like education materials and staff time to be able to have a much larger impact. So yeah, that was a good note to hear from Shoreline. So moving right along to the Climate Action Plan Implementation Dashboard that I recently published on the city website is just more of a way to provide visibility into how we're tracking towards our various key performance indicators for the Climate Action Plan. So in addition to the overall community level greenhouse gas reductions that I cited on an earlier slide, there's a host of other targets that the city adopted in the adoption of the Climate Action Plan, including achieving carbon neutral municipal operations by 2030, that 65% of new passenger vehicles would be EVs on the island by 2030. So all of that information I am going to be kind of keeping up to date on an annual basis on this dashboard. And so this is just kind of the first sort of high level overview to show that more than 3/4 of the actions in the Climate Action Plan, again, all 59 of them, are either underway or complete. So you can kind of see on the breakdown on the right-hand side, those are the different focus areas of the Climate Action Plan and just showing kind of a visual of how implementation has been going. So this is just one of the various key performance indicators, and just kind of showing this green line being the 2030 target, and then this is our most recent year, 2024 reporting. So anyone who would want to go see how we're trending on other of these key performance indicators, this is going to open a link that I just wanted to walk through briefly this evening, because I was quite excited about getting this Power BI dashboard to work. So you can also see all of the various kind of projects that are happening with the Climate Action Plan, but I would say most largely being able to view, just trying to make it as large as possible. Oh, realized it did not switch the screen I was sharing. There we are. Okay, so here you can see the various status updates for the actions and kind of highlighting what projects are related to the various actions. And then if I navigate back to the 2030 targets, you can see all of our different targets that the Climate Action Plan adopted and the data that we have and where the targets are for each one that has an associated target. So there are some key performance indicators here that are more indicative of trends rather than things that actually had a defined target, but just to be able to kind of visualize where we're at on all of the various data sources that we have. So pause for a second here. There's a lot of different KPIs. If there's anything anyone wanted to know specifically or any questions or anything else I can share. Right.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, the charts are indicating that a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions are associated with the use of electricity. And so shifting from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles, I mean, you take a gas vehicle off and you reduce emissions, but you put an electrical vehicle on and you create additional emissions associated with electricity. Is it possible to net that?
So there's a couple different things that are kind of happening at the state level with regards to our electricity grid. So utility providers are having to transition their power generation to cleaner sources. It's the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So actually, a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that we have seen over the past couple of years is due to PSE making their electricity generation more green. So they phased out coal plants. I think 2025 is the first year that it was completely offline, or 2026. It's very recent. But as they are making the power in a more renewable fashion and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in their generation, we are seeing kind of downstream that reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. So even though there is still greenhouse gas emissions associated with the electricity that we are using to then charge electric cars, it's still a lot lower than burning the fuel right there in your vehicle.
I'll skip for now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. I will just transition back into my slideshow here quickly as possible. Just to give kind of the quick highlights for 2026. Okay. Apologies for my technical difficulties as I try to reshare my screen. Okay. All right. So, all right. Next item on the agenda, we'll be going over the electric vehicle charging infrastructure plan that has been under development. So last year was primarily focused on the municipal plan. And then this year we've been focused on developing the community level plan. So we're planning on wrapping up that development of the plan in June. And then we're going to begin implementation as soon as we are finished with the plan development. And also going to be working on outlining an environmentally preferable purchasing policy that we're going to use it within the city for purchasing decisions. And that's in line with items that were highlighted on the 2025-2026 work plan. So with that, that was my full presentation this evening. If there was any other questions on the sustainability work or the climate action plan implementation.
Councilman Reynolds.
Well, first, just a general comment. I was encouraged to see all the progress that had been made. I didn't realize it was this much. That's great news. Earlier, you made a comment about vehicle miles traveled, which is obviously hugely important. Last time I'd looked in depth at this, emissions were not tracked that way, though. They were tracked by fuel sales or something like that. Is that still the case? I mean, how do we know how much emissions Mercer Island people are doing from auto use, since I don't think we track vehicle miles traveled?
So all of that is done through modeling that's done by the Puget Sound Regional Council. It's kind of drilled down based on vehicle registrations on Mercer Island. And then for the vehicle miles traveled, it's going to be primarily based on assumptions with that modeling. But they do use data that's specific to like vehicle registrations on Mercer Island and the fuel intensity of those vehicle types. So
if everybody on Mercer Island just stopped driving for a year, we wouldn't really get any credit for that?
We would definitely get credit for it. It would be a little bit fuzzy as it's kind of taken at the macro level and then modeled back down to Mercer Island specifically. I am trying to find other ways to get more granular data for vehicle miles traveled. But it's challenging to have access to some of that data.
One of the things I had advocated with our legislative delegation in the past was when you renew vehicle tabs, you should be required to report odometer readings. And that seems like an easy way for the state to start having that information and track it back. That might be something you can think about it to put on our agenda.
Yeah, that would definitely be one way we could solve that problem. Yeah, it's very tough because even there are some, like Google, for example, has their, they have a platform. I'm blanking on what the name of it is right now, but for larger cities, they would share access to vehicle miles traveled that they have from Google Map data and whatnot. But we are just at the threshold that they won't give it to me. I've been asking.
Call Google. Okay, Councilmember Weicker.
Alana, this is great work. You took the plan and made the dashboard and are doing all the data. And I know you're doing a ton of coordinating on the east side. And I just want you to take a minute to just brag about how you're working with the other cities and how the K4C is doing. I understand there was a change at the county and how that's managed or supervised or reported out or whatever the word is. But I just think you're doing great regional work too. I hear your name come up in different conversations, and I know other cities have different levels of staff and expertise, and I think you're a gem. So thank you for your work. Why don't you brag a little more about how you work within the region?
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Weicker. But yeah, I think a lot of the work that we're able to do regionally has just been really helpful to be able to lean on other cities that have more staff capacity or just more knowledge or are further along in their implementation. And just also getting to get lessons learned and be able to kind of avoid some maybe missteps that others have already kind of learned about and are able to warn others. So that has just been very helpful for me to be able to kind of maximize what we're able to do for Mercer Island. So.
Let's remember.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm delighted with all of the progress that we're making. It's great to see heat pumps being created. It's great to see new programs being developed, to see it, the first draft of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure plan that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. I was wondering if you could share with us some about the pilot program that was run for a while to there was a commute travel reduction plan that involved the city and I think it was Riot Games, and kind of what the vision was for that and what was learned from it and what we might try with the next one.
Yeah, so the pilot you're referencing is last April. So for Earth Month in April 2025, we did a short 4-week pilot of an EV shuttle that operated from the Mercer Island Park and Ride and was aimed at helping commuting staff that work at both the city and at Riot Games, which are the two sites on Mercer Island, the two employers that qualify for that are required to meet the state's commute trip reduction plan. So there's a couple different qualifiers that go into that. You have to have more than 100 staff reporting to a work site between the hours of 6 and 9 in the morning. So that's why it's pretty limited to just those two employers, because those are the only two that have enough at a single work site. So this pilot was to try to encourage staff that commute to those two facilities to take the bus at that point, public transit to their work site. And the pilot was for, like I said, just the 4 weeks. It was very short-lived. And we did not see a huge amount of ridership, but I think that was due to several different factors. One being that the amount of staff that already had reported using public transit to go to their work site for both the city and at Riot Games was already pretty low. I don't remember the exact percentages off the top of my head at this point. But also that there was only the bus and that there wasn't the light rail. So essentially what we're hoping to have learned from that is that once we have other options for public transit, that we can encourage more commuting staff to be able to take public transit the vast majority of the way to work. So we are seeking opportunities, grant funding to try to do a larger pilot that's maybe longer lived. I think also having a short-term program is really hard to change your habits around if you know that something's not going to last for very long. So really looking for something that we can do for a longer period of time and hopefully that impacts more people than just those two work sites. So
the one we had was entirely grant funded, and I think there is a lot of enthusiasm on the island for the new light rail system and finding a last mile solution to get to and from the station. So I'm enthusiastic about and quite optimistic about what the next pilot will be able to accomplish.
Yeah, I will note that program is not entirely funded by grant funding, but it was part of the implementation of our commute trip reduction program.
Got it. Thank you.
But yes, I think we have heard from quite a few community members that they're really interested in having some sort of solution in general to get to the light rail that's not parking in their vehicle, and also like very aware that we don't have a lot of bus service at different areas of the island, including by our city's facilities. So trying to fill that gap with what we can.
Deputy Becker.
First I would echo what everyone else said about thank you for putting in all this work and making lots of progress. It's encouraging to see all of that. I understand that the major sources of emissions are vehicles and home heating, and we've talked a lot about vehicle miles traveled. I'm curious on the heating side and the heat pumps. I mean, I see the effect of the ESC pilot, but I'm curious if we know how many people in the city have gas heating. Like, how do we even measure whether the numbers that we are seeing as successful or not? How do we know what we're even shooting for?
So we actually do have some idea of how many heat pumps we need to see installed through the program. I know that I had a chart up in my presentation last year with some data from an outside organization that had said like essentially how many we would need by 2030 in order to reach kind of like our saturation goal for heat pump installs. But there's a couple ways that we're kind of trying to track this. One is through how many times we're seeing in permits that get issued for a mechanical permit if they're swapping out a furnace, specifically, if folks are choosing, oh, my furnace has died. Like, now what is my next? Do I want to just do like for like, or do I want to take this opportunity and switch to a heat pump? And we are seeing an increase in people making that switch. I think it's because not just that they are maybe interested in electrification, but also because heat pumps offer cooling, which if you're just doing a like for like on your gas furnace, you're not going to get cooling options. So they not only are better for the environment, but make a slightly more comfortable household as well. Maybe more than slightly, but yeah, so we're tracking permit data. We have some vague idea of exactly about how many heat pumps need to be retrofitted into homes. And also with the new building codes, it's kind of pushing folks towards new builds, at least, to have heat pumps installed immediately.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Our final item of regular business is AB 6836, the electric vehicle charging plan development update. We welcome back Chief of Operations Jason Kidner and Sustainability Program Manager Alana Dorogatis.
All right. I'll have to put up with me again, trying to share my screen. Okay, and we also have joining us this evening, Eleanor Garrett from EXP. She is our consultant who has been working with us on developing our EV charging infrastructure plan, both the municipal and the community level. And just kind of as a quick reminder, this is one of the specific actions in the climate action plan and was identified as a work item specifically for this biennium. So I'll pass it to you.
Is it on? Yes, okay. Hello. Like Alana said, my name is Eleanor. I've been working with EXP, which is an architecture, engineering, and design firm. My department specifically focuses on long-term sustainability and resilience planning projects. So very briefly, since Alana already just gave us a really thorough overview of the climate action plan, I'm going to touch on how the climate action plan interacts with EV infrastructure and why we're even talking about this. Go into how we've been developing the plan, and then talk about the municipal fleet transition strategy, which is the portion of the plan that we have already developed, and then go into what is currently underway, which is the community portion of the plan. As you could see from Alana's presentation, the transportation sector does contribute a really significant portion of Mercer Island's overall GHG emissions. I believe in 2023, the 2023 inventory, which is what we were using when we made this report, it was 71% total, and in 2024 it was still 70%, so a pretty significant chunk. In the climate action plan, the city is aiming to have carbon neutral municipal operations by 2030 and to reduce 56% of all on-road emissions by 2030 as well. So electrifying the municipal fleet starting there is a really easy win to make some significant progress towards those goals. So this slide is kind of repetitive of what I've already been saying. But basically what we're doing here is providing an update on the EV charging infrastructure plan. This is a project that is in support of City Council Priority Number 4, which is focused on making Mercer Island a more environmentally and fiscally sustainable community. And like I said, the transportation sector does represent a really large portion of the city's emissions. So to assess the city fleet to develop our strategy, we looked at the whole existing fleet and sort of looked at the long-term picture to get us to both the 2030 and 2050 goals outlined in the CAP. So that's that 5 to 25 year range you see there. We were focusing on aligning the plan with the design and construction for planned facilities, as well as the existing fleet replacement schedule. Overall, in terms of transitioning to an electric vehicle fleet, there are quite a few benefits. You see lower long-term costs, which I will get into, obviously decreased emissions, which is the primary goal, and also the ability to, if you have a fully electric fleet, sort of take the lead as we start talking about that community portion of EV transition. If the city has a fully electric fleet, it's a lot easier to get the rest of the city on board. Here is that 2023 data I was talking about. 71% of Mercer Island's emissions come from transportation and other mobile sources. We can skip right.
I just want to note that that's the municipal operations emissions was 71%, not overall community emissions. But
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are those cost savings I was talking about. So the total cost of ownership analysis for the entire Mercer Island City fleet. Yes, you are going to see some initial costs that are higher than what you would see by replacing with internal combustion engine or ICE vehicles. Replacing entirely with EV vehicles would involve 2.8 million approximately more in capital costs. But you make that back pretty quickly when you look at the 12-year operational costs. You end up getting net savings of about $1.2 million over that 12-year period. Digging into that a little bit more, you can see broken down here where we're getting those cost savings from. So yes, the initial cost of the EVs is higher than an ICE vehicle, but you end up saving quite a bit of money in terms of fuel or powering those vehicles in this case. And the overall maintenance over the lifetime of an electric vehicle is lower than an internal combustion engine vehicle. So looking at the entirety of Mercer Island's fleet, we broke that down into what we are calling our slow charging fleet and our fast charging fleet. So essentially what this means is we looked at the use patterns of the entire fleet and looked at which ones sort of need to be ready to be operated all the time and need that fast charging, which is a more expensive way to charge a vehicle, versus the slow charging vehicles, which don't necessarily need to be active all the time. So there were 24 light duty vehicles in that slow charging fleet. Those are all non-emergency vehicles. And then the 27 vehicles in the fast charging fleet, that is anything related to emergency response, and then all of the medium to heavy duty trucks. And just to note, a key constraint was that when we were looking at the existing infrastructure at the Public Works facility, of course, available charging there was severely constrained in our analysis.
And it still is severely
constrained. That remains true. So like I said, we're also looking at the existing fleet replacement schedule because we want to make sure that we are not sort of throwing huge costs that aren't budgeted for in long-term planning. And so here you can see the planned replacement year for all of the existing fleet vehicles out through 2034. So when we're talking about implementing this plan, our goal here was to hand you guys a clear, actionable roadmap that can actually electrify the city's fleet and give you all a timeline for vehicle replacement and the specific charging infrastructure and installations that we would recommend based on the transition scenarios that we looked at. So in terms of those transition scenarios, we evaluated 2 different scenarios. They're very similar. You have a pretty small fleet, so not a lot of variability there. But scenario A, we would be fully transitioned by 2037, but we wouldn't start replacing vehicles until 2030. Scenario B actually takes a little bit longer. We're not fully electrified until 2039, but we can use some existing slow charging that we have on hand to start replacing vehicles before 2030.
I just wanted to add a little bit more context on the kind of reason behind the 2 scenarios is entirely due to the fact that we are so constrained in terms of where we are able to charge vehicles at the City Hall Public Works sort of campus. So 2030 was more of just not maybe necessarily fully realistic, but an ideal scenario of when we could maybe have more of an idea of when we can install chargers, because we would prefer to not install chargers that we then have to remove and risk damaging in the meantime. So this was just kind of giving us a little bit more of a cushion in terms of timing.
I can add some additional context too. So the council, we've been talking for many months now about the facility needs. The electrical challenges at the Public Works facility have come up numerous times, and this is an area where you're seeing it impacted as well. I will also say we have transitioned a number of fleet already to EV or plug-in hybrids, and we are competing for space now as it is. So just some additional context for consideration as well.
Councilor Reynolds.
Yeah, is the constraint there solely ours, or is there a PSE constraint? Can PSA deliver enough power to the island for us to do this?
Yes, PSE can deliver more than enough power. And in fact, that site has more capacity just generally based on the transformers, but it would require work in terms of installing new charging stations and whatnot.
So it's a charger install issue,
yes,
not a capacity issue.
And
Okay.
an issue of more not wanting to install chargers that we then have to move based on construction or anything else.
Councilor Adderall.
Yeah, well, for me, it always kind of comes down to the money. So where does all of this work and planning fit into a candidly very constrained budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So as part of the capital improvement plan or program that we do every 2 years with the budget adoption, the fleet replacement scenario is part of that conversation. So staff involved in the fleet replacements, we're looking out and in terms of our replacement strategies for those vehicles within our fleet. Some of the fleet are replaced at quicker intervals, some of them are spaced out, and there's always a true up exercise that takes place as part of the budget process where a vehicle may be able to extend beyond where we currently project it to be replaced. But essentially, we're creating a sinking fund for the replacement of that vehicle while the vehicle is aging out over time. So we will incorporate the decisions, the discussions around EV options for these vehicles as part of that fleet replacement strategy, as part of the capital improvement plan and budget adoption process that'll be in front of the council later this fall.
Okay.
But I will say we are starting to implement some of these transitions within our fleet, that some of them have penciled out to be cost neutral in terms of the upfront costs. An example I'll use is actually a recreation facility here. Recreational team used to have a 13-passenger van where we did a lot of the programming in-house. The cost to replace that van was originally budgeted at a higher dollar amount because that vehicle costs more money. We've actually converted that van to one of the Ford Lightnings that's provided remarkable improvement for some of the pop-up special events that we have in parks and throughout the course of the summer and spring and fall. That provides different advantages to them, right? They have a truck that can carry equipment to and from the site. They actually have a plug-in station on site. So if they have some inflatables or some fun stuff to do with the kids, they can actually use the vehicle to their advantage on the site. And the replacement at the Ford Lighting was at a lower cost compared to a 13-passenger van that was used historically. So that's part of that analysis and conversation and discussion that happens every 2 years as part of the fleet analysis.
Okay, thanks. I have another question when my turn comes around.
Councilor Weber.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of talk about the relative costs of EV versus gas vehicles, and there should be a lot of talk about the costs, but I'm not seeing a counterbalancing discussion about the impacts to the greenhouse gas reductions and the environmental gains of doing these. For example, on page 31, we mentioned that the slow charge fleet has a total cost of ownership savings of $2 million, while the fast charge fleet has a total cost of ownership premium of $850,000. And so it almost looks like a no-brainer to go with the slow vehicles first. But what I'd like to see is how much is the greenhouse gas reduction the same for the slow vehicles and the fast charging vehicles? Or do we actually get a much greater greenhouse gas reduction for every dollar that we put into a fast charger than into a lower slow charger? I don't know the answer to that, by the way. I'm just asking. But I think we need to be looking at both. We shouldn't just be thinking through our pocketbooks. We should also be thinking through our lungs. And I also think I didn't see any mention about using the 9655 building parking lot as a temporary place for parking vehicles that otherwise would be parked on the other side of the hedge in the PSM site. But I think long-term, we're eventually going to be needing chargers in the 9655 lot. So that might be one way that we could temporarily park some of the vehicles that are nearby. It wouldn't be in the public works site. I was wondering, what was that considered at the using the 9655 area?
So this plan, the municipal phase of this plan was completed in June of last year, so that we did not own the 9655 building yet at that point. But that I think is definitely something we are going to evaluate. But with ideally it not being totally temporary chargers that are installed there, that they're chargers that will be used there going into the future, but maybe the vehicle specifically that's living there might be more temporary. But
Exactly.
yes, and regarding the greenhouse gas emissions reductions associated with the slow charging versus fast charging fleet, it's pretty dependent on the vehicle itself. Vehicles that have a higher mileage are going to see more of a greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So sometimes that's the fast charging vehicles, if it's more of like the emergency related vehicles, not so much the heavy equipment vehicles versus the slow charge that maybe don't travel as far, which is why they're able to be slow charged. So it's very specific to the vehicle that we're looking at, which is why they did such a thorough fleet analysis. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
And Mr. Mayor, I have one other follow-up item on that, if I may, which is that with options A and B, option A doesn't have any vehicle replacements before 2030, which I presume would put our chances of reaching our 2030 net reduction goals at greater risk than if we went with option B, which replaces quite a few vehicles between now and 2030. So I think there's a significant reason as far as our GHG goals are concerned to be seriously considering option B.
Yes, there's definitely pros and cons with both. And yes, your point about us not having as good of a shot at hitting our 2030 goals for municipal operations is absolutely true. As Eleanor noted, like 71% of our transportation emissions for municipal operations are from, or greenhouse gas emissions for municipal operations are due to transportation. But that is a 50-50 split between fleet and employee commutes. So.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
Notwithstanding the prior comments, I'm going to continue asking about the costs of this whole thing. And this is partially a question about this and partially a facilities question, which is, if you're saying that we're slowed down because of the facilities and we would have cost savings of $1.2 million in total, is there any sense of, the cost that we're losing that we could understand or show and show that, like how much could we be, how much are we giving up by not having a facility right now? Or do we know that?
That is something that we can evaluate. We did, as part of the community phase of the project, we did set aside some budget to continue to look at the fleet plan because we knew that the PSM campus was not sort of set in stone. So that is something that we can analyze and add to the plan.
Okay, thanks.
I think on one of your first slides, I believe the goal was 20% of vehicles for non-municipal operations would be electric. Is that true?
Of all registered vehicles on the island, that's Mercer Island wide. So
what are we at now?
We're actually pretty close to that, if not already achieved that. That would be on the Power BI dashboard I showed earlier. Actually, I just can't remember because there's a lot of different stats on there, but I know we're actually quite close to that.
I thought it was like 18% a couple years ago. So
I don't want to say for sure that we have already hit that, but I know we are very, very close if we haven't actually. So
got it. Okay, move on.
Okay, so a little bit more about the two scenarios. The total cost of ownership is slightly lower under scenario B. So I don't have the exact figures on that in front of me. But the benefit for scenario A is that all gas vehicles are fully phased out by 2037. So again, like Alana said, there are some pros and cons for each scenario.
Can I actually ask a question about that?
Yeah.
What are the assumptions for the modeling of the cost of electric vehicles?
So included in the total cost of ownership is all of the capital costs and all of the operating costs. So the cost of the vehicle to purchase it. And then I would have to refer to like the full packet and I could share that with you.
Yeah, I mean on the vehicle cost to purchase it. Is the assumption that they go up or go down or relative to inflation or what's the?
I would have to look at my model. I'm pretty sure that we're accounting for pretty significant inflation. We're assuming that there will be some, but we're also assuming that the cost of the production of vehicles will go down a little bit because there's so many more technologies that are emerging. And it is becoming easier and more efficient to produce these vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I can dig into my model.
Councilmember Wymer.
Yeah, just on this slide and I want to make sure I understand what it's saying. So in scenario A, the rightmost blue column there is in the year 2038, and it has a height of 5. And the vertical axis says it's vehicle count. So I presume that means that in the year 2038, the last 5 gas vehicles get replaced with 5 electric vehicles. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, this is based on like the vehicle replacement years that we have outlined in our fleet.
Got it. So it's actually
schedule.
2038, not 2037, that the scenario A finishes. And in scenario B, in 2039, there's only 1 vehicle that's being replaced. So the difference between the two in terms of when the last vehicle goes is only 1 vehicle a year, essentially. Effectively, they're ending at about the same time. They start at very different times, though. Scenario B starts a lot sooner and helps us a lot more with our 2030 goals.
Yes, and kind of spreads out that capital cost
yes,
a little bit more.
Yeah.
Councilmember Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. And I realize this is probably way too late to be asking this question, but with the recent pivot by a number of automakers away from electric vehicles and billions and billions of dollars in write-downs on manufacturing equipment, I mean, how confident are we that we're on the right path?
Well, Washington State still does have legislation that like all passenger vehicles and also medium and heavy duty vehicles also have to be electrified. I think by 2035 is the passenger vehicles, and then it goes out further. So we still are in alignment with state legislation is pushing us in this direction anyway. So I don't know what the state is thinking about all of these other things, but
the state doesn't make cars though.
Yeah, Alana, if I could just chime in here, council member, your question is a good one. And I just want to remind you all that what we're reviewing tonight is a planning document. As we make decisions on vehicle replacement, it has to be right time and right vehicle. In many circumstances, we're still seeing the technology isn't there. So these are decisions that are made on a case-by-case, vehicle-by-vehicle basis. But what I'm proud of here is that we have a plan and we're beginning to study this issue because I do anticipate some of this will be operationalized and some of it may come much later. Like many of our bigger rigs are probably a ways out from fitting into this plan. So it's a good question. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we've discussed that electric fire trucks are not in the immediate future.
Okay.
Right. So in terms of the infrastructure that is required to support a fully electric fleet, we would need a total of 64 charging ports across the Public Works City Hall site and the Community Center site. This would include 18 level 3, those are the fast chargers, and 14 level 2 chargers. In addition to that 64 number is the total number of ports, and then the chargers are, each one has 2 ports on it. So that's why those numbers look very different. The total power demand that we are expecting will be required to power the fleet is approximately 2.5 megawatts of additional power. This is fully within PSE's ability to supply to the island, both currently and with their planned expansions. As part of this report, we also looked at sort of the feasibility of vehicle to building charging. So basically what vehicle to building does is it allows you to, generally you plug your car in, you get power out of it. Vehicle to building, you can turn that back around, you can flip a switch and pull power from the car's battery back into the building. There's a few different vehicle to X technologies. There's vehicle to building, there's vehicle to grid. These are fairly new systems. They're still kind of under study. I know that Puget Sound Energy is currently conducting some pilot programs for vehicle to grid, but they are not sort of doing those as like a an install right now. Vehicle to building pairs really well with on-site solar generation and battery energy storage systems. If you are trying to build a way to store a lot of power and have access to power during extended power outages. But what the fleet could provide in terms of vehicle to building power is a little bit negligible in terms of sort of long-term operations during an extended outage. And that's just a little graphic of what the vehicle to building looks like. Where we currently are is in phase 2 of this project. That's the community-wide EV adoption. So currently underway, our goal here is to support community-wide adoption of EVs and address any barriers to charging access or switching to EVs. So what we're focusing on here is growing our existing public EV charging infrastructure, and then working with any commercial and multifamily sites that we identify as sort of key to helping this transition, and encouraging them to look into charger installation in places where it's sort of out of the city's hands. And then we're also, as part of this, sort of looking at existing policies and regulations at the local, regional, and federal level to see how we can sort of further support EV adoption. So for both the municipal fleet transition strategy and for the community-wide plan, we are using a platform called ElectroTempo. This is a platform that is designed to help places transition to an EV future, basically. So what we are doing in ElectroTempo is doing what we call demand forecasting. So we're looking at existing demand in Mercer Island and then extrapolating out into the future, trying to get a picture of what we think demand for charging will look like in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. This involves looking at current EV registrations, looking at goals like getting to 100% EV registrations on the island by 2050, looking at existing charger coverage and a whole bunch of other different factors to try to get a picture of where people are charging, where there are gaps in charger access, and all of those things. City staff are working with us right now to look at a set of potential sites for future charging installations and to prioritize them by how effective they would be at sort of bridging any existing gaps. We're also working with Puget Sound Energy to get an idea of how ready the sites that we're looking at are for charger install, because that is a huge factor. If we need to be bringing in a lot of new power, those are less sort of desirable sites than ones that already have plenty of power ready to go. We are looking to wrap up the community phase of this plan by June of this year. This is sort of an idea of what you can see inside of the ElectroTempo platform. On the far left is what we call our adoption curve. So this is looking at a model of when people are adopting EVs over time. That second image shows you what our charging demand maps look like. So darker colored areas are areas that have a lot higher demand. Lighter colored areas have lower demand, and we can scale that from present all the way into the future, and that sort of pairs with that adoption curve. So you can see the demand go up over time. The site analysis is where we are ranking sites, and I'll get into that a little bit more. And then site feasibility, that's a little bit of what I was talking about working with Puget Sound Energy. Overall, all of the projections that I'm showing you are looking at winter usage. So winter charging is going to be the most demanding of our grid. It takes a little bit more power to charge up those batteries in the wintertime. And so this gives us the best picture of like the highest demand that we're ever going to see. And we are also looking at sort of the average projection. We also analyzed a sort of lower demand of adoption where people are sort of adopting EVs a little bit slower, and a more aggressive adoption scenario. But everything I'm showing you here is just sort of that middle ground one. They're all going to be expanded on in the full report though. This will show you sort of how we expect EV electricity demand to impact Mercer Island's total demand from Puget Sound Energy over time. For reference, right now, in 2026, we estimate that EVs use about 33 megawatt hours of power. So you can see that's already expanding up to 55 in 2030. And by the time we get out to 2050, and we're expecting and assuming full EV usage across the island, we're up to 222. EV charging demand also varies by time of day pretty significantly. You can see we have a huge peak at about 8 a.m., not surprising. And you can also see that at home and away from home charging demand varies pretty significantly throughout the day. Again, not super surprising to see that at home charging demand is much higher overnight when people are charging their vehicles while they're asleep. And away from home charging demand is much higher during the workday when they are out and about. So this is what the EV charger site prioritization dashboard looks like. This is what we are currently working on. So there are a lot of different ways that we can rank the different sites that we're considering. And so we are assessing all of the different ranking weights that we want to be using to look at the different sites that are under consideration before we sort of come up with our final prioritized list of potential sites for installation. Some of the things that we are considering, like I said, are the feasibility of installation. How ready is that site to receive a charger? Making sure that we are prioritizing access for our underrepresented groups. Sites that we believe, based on the charging demand data, will provide the greatest benefit overall to community members. And then also their proximity to existing chargers. We don't necessarily want to be putting them across the street from each other. We want to be spreading out that access. Just for an example of a couple of the demographics that we might be looking at, you can see on the left are the existing chargers on the island, and then a couple of measures of historically disadvantaged groups when it comes to electric vehicle ownership, renters, and then non-white residents. You can see that actually charger access for renters is not bad, but could probably be a little bit better if we pulled some charger access up into that top quadrant, and same with our non-white residents. We have some questions.
Councilman Earl.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I missed the memo on this, but I remain unclear about who's going to be installing these charging stations.
It's a mix. So some of them might be city-owned chargers, but we're also trying to work with multifamily properties and like commercial property owners to help connect them with pre-existing incentives for installing chargers. So this is not going to be entirely on the city.
And the city will charge for the chargers, right?
For the city-owned ones, absolutely, yes.
But so I guess I'm questioning, why do we need to be doing this? Because we're not trying to figure out where to put a new gas station on the island. The market drives that. And, you know, so why doesn't the market drive this?
Because one of the main factors that we're kind of looking at with this specifically is, as you can notice in town center, there's a large portion of renters, and there's a lot of multifamily housing where there might be folks who live in an apartment building who have an EV and can't charge it at home, as opposed to folks who live in a residence where they have access to a charger that they could charge in their driveway. So we're trying to expand access for people who don't have that ability currently, and to help fill that need as people choose to electrify their vehicles. So it's, again, not just city-owned chargers. We're working with multifamily property owners and parking lot owners to help connect them with the ability to add that asset into their facilities.
Alana, may I chime in too? Councilmember Anderl, I'll give you an even lower hanging fruit answer. The infrastructure, or the electric vehicle infrastructure plan, charging plan was part of your climate action plan. And this item was directed to be, the work item was directed to be performed by the city council. So we're here tonight, you know, on a check-in on a work item that was set by the council. I just want to be candid. This isn't elective staff work.
Sure, I understand that. I'm just, again, worried about the budget and where the money for installing chargers comes from.
Yes, and I will say this, just today, I sent you an email because my blood pressure is through the roof right now over the budget and our foreseeable deficit. And so as we continue to work through the plan, it is not a foregone conclusion that the city will be funding any of this. That will be a future policy decision of the council. And I want to give you assurance that there's multiple checkpoints as we work through a plan like this and implementation.
Thank you.
Councilor Weber.
Yeah, so one thing I was noticing on the previous slide that I didn't see a dot at the baseball field that is in the middle of the island where the Islanders play against schools from other areas around the region. If somebody is driving from North Bend in an electric vehicle and needs to be able to park there and then get all the way back home that evening, if it's a cold day, I'm concerned that some electric vehicles wouldn't have the range to be able to do that, especially if they didn't start off with a completely full charge. So I think for our visitors coming off the island, it's important to have chargers prioritized in the places where visitors are coming, like to our sports fields. And I would hope that eventually they will do the same as well, so that when people from here are going in electric vehicles to some faraway place, they can make it back home without having to stop for an hour somewhere to get some power part way through. And let me know if I'm just not seeing it, but I think it was supposed to be, right, just to the right of the Groveland dot is the area where the ball field is. But I just want to make a plug for that one.
Noted. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
Yeah, I'm curious if you've done some analysis on one thing that I've never seen. Retail price of electricity, and last time I checked, is around 11 cents a kilowatt hour, give or take. We were early adopters of Tesla, so we had free supercharging for life. So I've never had to worry about the cost of electricity at chargers. But now that we got another vehicle, it looks like most superchargers are charging about 40 cents a kilowatt hour. Given that difference between the 40 and the 11, can charger installs pay for themselves? And if so, over what sort of time horizon?
So that's actually something that EXP hasn't gotten to yet, but is going to be evaluating in this plan development, is how we want to approach charging for charger usage in the future. So right now, I actually earlier this year adjusted the rate for all of our, at this time, it's just the one at the community center because the ones in the city hall parking lot are no longer publicly accessible. But for anybody charging at that station, I tried to re-level set it to make sure that we're at least covering our cost. But I would like to use this plan to take an opportunity to say, can we use this as some sort of way to have a fund for either new charger installs, charger maintenance as it needs to be repaired, and go beyond just trying to cover ongoing usage costs.
Thanks. I'd love to see that analysis as part of a future update.
Yes, definitely. That will be hopefully completed by June of this year.
Yeah.
Alana, when you say that you raised the cost, is that to cover the cost of the power, or the cost of the install and the power?
The cost of just the power. The charger that's installed at the community center was installed, I think, in 2014. It's been there for a really long time. And I think we had some grant funding for those. But right now, it's just about covering the cost of the power. We were not covering the cost of the power for a little while.
So what is the rate of that charger now?
It's 16 cents a kilowatt hour, because that also is to account for, depending on time of day that somebody is charging at the community center. If they're charging at a peak demand hour for the building, the rate of the electricity is going to be a little higher. So I'm trying to kind of level set it for all times of the day.
And at least residences on the island, the charge for electricity is not time dependent, correct?
No, it's not time dependent for residences on the island right now, but there is options for PSE. Some folks might have opted into their time of use program. I'm not sure, but it's not across the board.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Becker.
Sorry if I missed this, but if we're looking at the chargers that would be at the for the city, they're I think you said something like 18 level 3 chargers. Would those be publicly accessible, or would some of those be publicly accessible, or is it just the city has some for internal use and then we have separate ones for?
And the city fleet chargers would be just for the city fleet. So they're constantly accessible for us, but.
Okay. You said there were some at the city hall that weren't publicly accessible. So I wasn't sure if we could,
They're not currently public.
They used to be public chargers. They're not currently publicly accessible because we are using them for some of our electrified fleet vehicles.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Weinberg.
Yeah, a question for City Manager Bond. Was the cost and the process, or was the, let me put it another way, was how we're going to fund this, part of the scope of this electric vehicle charging infrastructure project, or was the scope of the project just to figure out how much do we need and how much do we currently have and how long it would take to build it?
Thanks for the question. It's not typical that you would scope how to fund it. The plan identifies the need and implementation phasing, and then the council, through subsequent budget discussions, would determine how to fund it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Weicker.
Not to belabor the point, but Alana, do you see any Climate Commitment Act money coming through, or PSRC, or like what is the appetite for funding grant programs in communities like ours with a project like this?
So we did get funding for the plan development for the municipal phase. That was fully funded through a grant from the Department of Commerce. And then for charger installs, there are a variety of grant programs. Commerce has one and Ecology also has one. I will note that we have been applying to those rounds of funding every time they've become available, and we have not yet been successful. They're very competitive, and Mercer Island is not the most competitive applicant for some of those grant requirements. But every avenue that I can find for funding, I am trying to
I
go down
figured
that
you were,
path.
and I can't thank you enough for trying.
Councilmember Weimer, is that all there?
Hold it, sorry.
All right.
All right. So talking about where we want to be installing these chargers. So we are evaluating both public, city and county owned sites as well as some private sites. Overall, I believe we are looking at 97 total sites. 9 of those are city and county owned. So those would be chargers that the city installs and operates. And then the other ones are multifamily locations, gas stations, and some other private or commercial sites. So those are sites that we will be looking at, evaluating for their feasibility, and then we're developing outreach strategies and materials to sort of try to get some of the people who we rank as the highest priority for infrastructure on board with installing. So overall, we're going to be closing out our community plan with an implementation strategy that's going to be including recommendations for how Mercer Island can support like EV charging as a whole across the island for the broader community. We've only just started this part, but we will be making some policy and code recommendations, so some potential changes to city code or some new policy that could help further installation of new charging infrastructure. We are going to be looking at potential funding strategies, so we are going to be trying our best to pair any recommendations for charger installations with potential funding sources, as well as at least our best estimate of what that's going to cost right now. Obviously, that's going to change pretty dramatically over the coming decades. And then also looking at developing some recommendations for managing that charging infrastructure, particularly for the city-owned sites. Next steps, we're going to finalize that prioritized site list, finish creating all of those outreach materials, and finalize the implementation strategy recommendations.
Any other questions?
I think we asked them all. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to other business in the planning schedule, and welcome City Manager Jesse Bond.
City Council, I do not have any updates for you on the planning schedule.
Okay, Council, are there any upcoming council member absences to report? Councilmember Weicker.
I'll be remote on the 17th and might have to miss the second half of the meeting.
Okay. Council member reports. Deputy Mayor Becker.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Weicker. Councilmember Weinberg.
So I've now completed 11 of my 14 planned day trips to Olympia this session. Of the 110 bills that I've been monitoring, I've identified 20 of those which are still alive, and if they pass, will have some impact to Mercer Island. I'll send a full list to the city staff and the council. Of those 20, the top 7 are House Bill 1796, which allows schools to issue bonds for capital levies, which only require a simple majority of voters. Senate Bill 6002, establishing ALPR camera regulations, which several of us have already testified on. Senate Bill 6110, creating an e-motorcycle advisory work group. House Bill 1859, expanding the existing incentives for building affordable housing on land owned by faith-based organizations. Senate Bill 6162, which expands property tax exemptions for income qualifying seniors and the disabled, including a standard deduction and a deduction for those who rent out a room in their house. And House Bill 1717, allowing qualifying affordable housing projects to apply for sales tax exemptions on building materials, which could help a lot with some of our 0 to 30%. And House Bill 2266, which would require some revision to our permitting process for extremely low income housing and permanently supportive housing. We've also averted some significant policy implementation issues. And when I say we, I'm referring to the broad legislative team, including myself, Mayor Rosenbaum, Deputy Mayor Becker, city staff, our lobbyists, and our partners at the AWC, as well as other testifiers. Some concrete examples about how our careful bill analysis and concerted testimony has made a difference. On Senate Bill 6026, it would have disallowed our ground floor retail requirement in town center, but that's been now amended so it aligns with our current code. House Bill 2418, which would have allowed a homeowner's architect to decide unilaterally when a building permit application is officially complete. That has now been amended to keep that decision authority appropriately in the hands of a city employee. And Senate Bill 6002, whose data retention timeline requirements would have made police car mounted ALPR cameras unusable for parking enforcement. We got that amended to allow parking enforcement data to be retained until the parking tickets have been fully adjudicated, including appeals. Finally, no discussion about the 2026 legislative session would be complete without mentioning the elephant in the room, which is the proposed bill on a new income tax on those making over $1 million a year, 6336. I'll leave the pro and con debate of that to the op-ed page authors, but suffice it to say the bill does appear to be on track for passing this year. And my next open lunch will be on noon Sunday, March 15th at Vivian's Bistro. The address is 2441 76th Avenue Southeast. As always, all are welcome. It's an open agenda, news, sports, weather, humor, even questions about city business or state legislation. All I ask is that everyone show their respect to the chef by ordering some food and or beverage. It's delicious. And let me know if you're coming so I can reserve a large enough table.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Andrew.
Nothing.
Councilmember Shea.
Yeah, so last Friday, Deputy Mayor Becker and I attended the Puget Sound Regional Council Conference for newly elected officials. And yeah, it was really nice to meet mayors and council members from 4 counties, King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap. And we had a small group breakout session and found that the top 5 largest issues facing our region are: number 1, budget constraints; number 2, growth management; housing affordability, infrastructure; and then access to transportation. So pretty much aligned with what's going on Mercer Island. And actually tomorrow Mercer Island is hosting a very large Sound Cities Association networking event. And right here in our community center, over 20 Sound Cities Association cities will be here, and over 60 elected officials and staff will be attending. So yeah, so I think several of us will be there to welcome people from all over to Mercer Island. And yeah, I was invited to for a talk at a local retirement community, and it was surprising to hear that most of them did not know about our city weekly e-newsletter. So I just wanted to put out there, we do have a city e-newsletter that our community can sign up for through our website, mercerisland.gov. And some people didn't really know who to talk to or call if they notice some issue that they want to be addressed. So customer service. That is the first line of defense. You call customer service 206-275-7600 or email customerservice@mercerisland.gov. Yeah, so my next community chat is on Sunday, March 22nd from 1 to 3 at a new event menu on Mercer Island, The Rock, at 7605 Southeast 27th Street, Suite 102. And there's actually also, if you enjoy culture and music, there are 2 free concerts at the high school performing arts center. So the one tomorrow night, Wednesday night, is the all district band concert at 6:30. And on Thursday, we have the all district orchestra concert at 6:30. So they're a free concert and welcome the community to join. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tomorrow, Deputy Mayor Becker and I are meeting with the chamber for a little conversation. Looking forward to hearing from local business owners. Next week, there's a meeting of the East Side mayors essentially talk about sound transit expansion and what sort of that looks like going forward. So I will report back after that. Okay, the City Council will now go into executive session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. 1I, the City Council will now be in recess from 8:05.
Sorry, 15 minutes, not 30. I forgot to correct you.
Okay,
earlier.
15
Thank you.
minutes. The City Council will now be in recess from 8:05 until 8:10 p.m. And the City Council will convene the executive session at 8:10 until 8:25, excuse me, p.m.
Thank you for waiting. The time now is 8:25, and the city council are going to continue an executive session for an additional 5 minutes. Good evening, and thank you for your patience. City Council is going to continue in executive session for an additional 5 minutes until approximately 8:35. Thank you.